Imagine living hundreds of years, exploring various lands, mastering the essence of magic itself, and even slaying the demon king only to think nothing of such achievements. But when your former party members begin to pass due to old age, you begin to rediscover memories you once thought insignificant and live life to the fullest, discovering what it truly means to live in the moment. Our story starts with our group of heroes heading to the royal capital, all wondering what types of celebrations are happening in town. The hero wonders what types of jobs they'll have in the future, especially because the Demon King is now defeated, prompting the priest to wonder if he can find a job where he can drink. The hero turns to the elf, Frieren, asking Frieren how she'll spend her life, especially since elven lives are very long. As the hero's party march through town, they are praised and celebrated, only to stand before the king, who acknowledges their party to house Himmel the hero, Eisen the warrior, Hyder the priest, and Frieren the mage. Thanking the heroes for slaying the Demon King, we cut to that night where the town is celebrating their newfound peace, cutting to Himmel, who tells everyone that there will be statues of them erected. As Frieren mocks the town for only giving them 10 copper coins when they first started their adventure, Hyder states that everything is now behind them, and instead, they should celebrate. As the gang gaze off into the night sky, they all acknowledge that it's been 10 years since they started adventuring, reminiscing on their first day, where Himmel and Eisen were almost executed for bad-mouthing the king. They also remember times when Hyder would get so drunk during their adventures and Frieren would constantly fall for the most basic of traps, all erupting in a laughter for only remembering bad memories. Taking a breath, Himmel thanks everyone for the 10 years they spent together, but Frieren wonders what's so amazing about 10 years, reminded that 10 years by human standards is a long time. Just then, they all turn to face the night sky, spotting the Era meteor shower that only occurs once every 50 years. As the gang bicker about not getting to see the full beauty of the meteor shower from the city, Frieren utters that she'll take them to a better location next time they see it, making Himmel chuckle, grateful for the memories. The next morning, the party bid goodbye to Frieren, who plans on exploring the central lands to collect and learn more spells. As Frieren leaves, the others wonder how old Frieren truly is, cutting to several years later when Frieren has explored different locations, learned many new things, and has achieved many new goals. When Frieren visits a shopkeeper asking for a shadow dragon's horn, the shopkeeper states that shadow dragons haven't been alive for around 20 to 30 years, disappointing as Frieren needs a shadow dragon horn for her experiments. Frieren remembers that Himmel collected a shadow dragon horn in the Demon King Castle, reasoning that she'll visit to watch the meteor shower with everyone whilst also collecting the shadow dragon horn. As Frieren walks through the capital, she's amazed to see everything has changed over the years, only to suddenly hear Himmel's voice. But when she turns around, Frieren realizes that Himmel has grown quite old. Himmel states that it's been 50 years, both sitting down, only for Frieren to ask about the dragon horn. Remembering the memories from collecting the horn, Himmel happily gives Frieren the horn, telling Frieren that although she doesn't treasure the dragon's horn as much, Himmel himself never forgot the time spent collecting the horn. As Frieren heads outside to deliver the horn, she wonders what's the big deal about a lousy dragon's horn, only to head inside, asking Himmel to head out for the meteor shower. As they leave town, Frieren greets Eisen and Hyder, who are amazed to see Frieren hasn't aged one bit, but Frieren is still against Hyder patting her head. Frieren praises Eisen for seeming the same since they last met, something they all know is due to Eisen's dwarf heritage. As they begin to head off, Frieren tells them that the spot she picked out takes a week to travel to, but seeing as this is like the old days, they all gladly follow Frieren. As the gang tells stories over campfire and battle monsters like the old days, they all eventually make it to a lake, where Himmel thanks Frieren for their final adventure together, completely captivated by their final meteor shower together. With some more time passing, Himmel finally passes away, prompting Frieren and the others to attend Himmel's funeral, but Frieren is scolded for not showing any emotions, making her wonder what this strange feeling that is bubbling up inside her. As the day proceeds, Frieren begins reminiscing on her time with Himmel, all whilst watching his casket be buried, only to break down crying, regretting not spending more time to get to know Himmel better. A few days afterwards, Hyder reveals that he'll be heading back to the Holy City, getting one last look at Frieren as Hyder states he'll probably pass away soon due to all the drinking. As Hyder bids Eisen and Frieren farewell, Frieren reveals that she will be starting her new exploration into humans, asking Eisen to accompany her on her new journey, But Ison reveals that he too has grown old, asking Frieren to not look so sad. Seeing as there is nothing left, Frieren bids Ison farewell, both heading in the opposite directions, only to cut to 20 years after Himmel's passing, where Frieren is lost in the forest outside the holy city. Just then a young girl appears, asking if Frieren is lost, but when Frieren asks to know where Hyder lives, the young girl takes Frieren to Hyder's home. Frieren is happy to see that Hyder is still alive. Hyder admits that it wasn't too easy to pass away, surprised to hear that Frieren has brought some alcohol for his grave, but Hyder reveals he had stopped drinking ages ago. Seeing the adorable girl serve herself and Hyder some tea, Frieren learns the girl's name is Fern, a war orphan from the southern lands. Frieren finds it unusual for Hyder to adopt Himmel's kindness, but Hyder is more curious as to why Frieren is visiting him. Pleased to hear that Frieren just so happened to be visiting whilst on her adventure to learn more about humans. Hyder asks if Frieren would be willing to take Fern as her apprentice mage, but Frieren is sternly against this, reminding Hyder how easy it is for apprentice mages to pass away during battle. Understanding of Frieren's decision, Hyder gives Frieren an ancient grimoire from the tomb of Uig the Sage, a book meant to contain lost spells for resurrection and immortality. Amazed that such a grimoire still existed, Frieren states that it'll take at least 5 to 6 years to decipher the text, but upon hearing this, Hyder utters that he is indeed quite afraid of dying, asking for Frieren to give him the slightest hope for immortality. As repayment for the grimoire, Frieren agrees to teach Fern some spells. Cutting to later that day, where Frieren had finally managed to track down Fern waiting for her on the cliff of a forest, impressed that Fern is able to conceal her mana so well. Fern states that Hyder will give Fern the title of mage if Fern manages to blast a hole in a boulder across from them, something Frieren praises Hyder for setting Fern. Out of nowhere, Fern conjures a powerful beam of magic, but the beam falls short of reaching the boulder, giving Frieren some motivation to teach Fern, happy to hear that Fern likes magic just like herself. Taking Fern to a nearby waterfall, Frieren tells Fern that long-range magic consists of 3 key factors, these being mana capacity, strength of firing the spell, and the level of the mage itself. When Fern confirms she knows this already, Frieren states that Fern's spell falling short means Fern is lacking in mana and firing strength, something Fern will need to spend time on. Seeing Fern upset, Frieren reminds Fern that her magic control is still very high, something very unique, especially for such a young age. That night, Frieren shares a meal with Hyder and Fern, only to end the night by studying the grimoire. With several years of Frieren training Fern passing by, all 3 spend time together whilst Frieren continues to decipher the grimoire. But having lost track of time, Frieren reports to Hyder that Fern has grown so much in 4 years. With Hyder happy to hear that, Frieren mentions how she'll probably finish deciphering the grimoire before Fern becomes a fully fledged mage. But as Frieren turns to check on Hyder's reaction, she spots Hyder has collapsed. Frieren helps move Hyder to his bed. Hearing Hyder apologize for the trouble, coincidentally asking Frieren to not look so sad. With Frieren promising to decipher the grimoire fast, Frieren first heads out to inform Fern that Hyder has collapsed, asking Fern to halt her training to look after Hyder. Sadly, Fern states that if she stops now, she won't be able to show Hyder how strong she's gotten before Hyder passes, revealing that Hyder was the one that saved her. Flashing back, a young Fern is seen grasping onto a necklace with a picture of her family, wondering if she should take her own life. Out of nowhere, Hyder appears, advising Fern to reconsider her actions as Hyder once had a friend that had passed away. Hyder states that his friend was the epitome of justice, and Hyder had wished that his life was taken instead of his friend. But since his friend is no longer with him, Hyder states that he'll stay alive to ensure the memories of his precious friends' lives on. With the young Fern remembering the memories she had with her family, Fern the present declares that Hyder had always feared leaving Fern all alone. Therefore, Fern states that she wants to show Hyder she can fend for herself before Hyder passes away. With Frieren understanding Fern's wishes, Frieren states that she'll allow Fern to do as she pleases, heading back to continue deciphering the grimoire. As more time passes, Fern is seen continuing to improve her mana capacity and firing strength, all whilst Frieren finishes up deciphering the grimoire, only to confront Hyder, asking if Hyder already knew the grimoire didn't contain any spells to bring back the dead nor immortality. Hyder reveals that magic for immortality doesn't exist, happy to hear that Frieren now considers for a mage. meaning Frieren could finally take Fern with her on her travels. With Frieren realizing Hyder had tricked her into training Fern, Hyder states that her reward is in the nearby drawer, requesting for Frieren to take Fern and leave by tonight, as Hyder fears his time is almost up. Frieren calls out Hyder for trying to act tough, revealing that Fern has been waiting to say goodbye to Hyder, breaking down as Frieren orders Hyder to spend his remaining time with Fern. As Frieren goes on a walk, Frieren learns that Hyder had saved Fern, knowing that Himmel would have done the exact same thing, leaving Hyder and Fern alone, only to confirm that Fern had managed to reach the boulder. The next day marks the death of Hyder, prompting Fern and Frieren to pour out some booze on Hyder's tombstone, only for them to head elsewhere. With 26 years passing since Himmel's death, Fern and Frieren continue to adventure together, both completing tasks in order to acquire new spells. Their most recent spell produces warm tea, whereas some previous ones involved removing rust from bronze statues and turning sweet grape sour. As the two head to their next adventure, they meet up with an old lady, only to be guided to a disheveled statue of Himmel. The lady reveals that her town was attacked by a monster years ago, but luckily Himmel had arrived and saved them, ultimately leading to a statue of Himmel being erected in his honor. When the old lady mentions how sad it is to see the statue all beat up, Frieren corrects her, stating that it's Himmel's fault for accepting a statue of himself to be made in the forest, something that reminds the lady that there was an elf accompanying Himmel at the time. Without saying any more, Frieren helps clean up the statue, pleasing the lady, but the old lady finds it sad that the scenery around the statue is too plain. Before Frieren can use a spell to grow some flowers, Frieren suddenly remembers Himmel's favorite flower, the blue moon weed. As the old lady takes them back to her home, she's surprised to hear Frieren knows about the blue moon weeds, as they used to grow in a nearby forest, but have since long died out. Seeing Fern acting weird, Frieren asks to see what Fern is hiding, discovering that Fern was trying to hide seed rats in her coat, intending on setting them free. With both girls heading out, Frieren states that they'll be heading to the nearby forest in hopes of finding some blue moon weeds, something Frieren acknowledges is for her own selfish desires. With several months of Frieren and Fern searching for the blue moon weed, the girls grow used to spending time in town with the old lady and out in the fields. One day, Fern has a chat with the old lady, sad to see that Frieren is fixated on searching for this non-existent flower, even though Frieren could be saving lives. Hearing Fern so intellectually convey her feelings, the lady hands Fern a bag of seeds, asking Fern to tell Frieren how she truly feels. Mustering up the courage, Fern tells Frieren how she feels, prompting Frieren to apologize, as she promises to end her search soon. Fern demands to know when, but Frieren points out that a nearby seed rat has stolen the seed bag the old lady gifted Fern and is leaving behind a trail they should follow. As the girls chase after the seed rat, Fern wonders why Frieren is so fixated on collecting spells, but Frieren states she only started collecting spells because a special someone had complimented her vast knowledge of spells. As both girls stop in front of an abandoned building, Frieren states that seed rats often hide seeds in different locations, but when Frieren spots a blue petal fall from the top of the building, Frieren flies to inspect her findings. Flashing back, Frieren remembers a time when Himmel had told Frieren his favorite flower was the blue moon weed, and had wished he could show Frieren one day. On top of the building, Frieren is amazed to see so many gorgeous blue moon weeds, grateful to finally lay eyes on them. As Fern flies after Frieren, Fern still can't understand why Frieren loves collecting spells, but Frieren reminds Fern that Fern became a mage to impress Hyder, something very similar to Frieren's situation. As the girls return to show off their work to the old lady praises the girls for decorating the statue, but before Frieren leaves, she repays Himmel for his gift in the past. On the 27th year since Himmel's passing, Frieren and Fern are seen visiting a trading city of Worm, where Frieren is asked to split up to restock on supplies. When Fern calls out Frieren for making her buy everything, Fern has a bad feeling when Frieren goes off on her own to buy things, having bought a massive skull in the past, clothes dissolving potions, and even random books. When the two split up, Fern chooses to follow Frieren, fearing their traveling expenses will go to waste, but spots Frieren in front of an accessory store. With Frieren distraught at what to purchase, Frieren ends up settling on something, prompting Fern to continue to tail Frieren. Whilst passing through some alleys, Fern wonders if she should leave Frieren be, but when she overhears that Frieren is planning on buying some desserts, Fern gets jealous, having not had any desserts in months. Following Frieren into a smoky tavern, Fern gets worried that Frieren is lost, spotting Frieren speaking with some scary-looking men. As Frieren leaves the tavern, Fern notices that she's heading back to the inn, rushing to finish off her duties, only to apologize for finishing shopping so late. Brushing that aside, Frieren takes Fern to a dessert store in town, allowing Fern to buy whatever dessert she wants, revealing that she had been saving up money to treat Fern and herself. When Fern asks what Frieren would like, Fern corrects herself, stating that she already knows Frieren wants Merker pudding, reminding Frieren of her time with the heroes, where Himmel had mentioned that he knows Frieren's favorite dessert is the Merker pudding. When Frieren feels bad for not knowing much about the others, Himmel mentions his favorite food is an omelet. Eisen's favorite food are sour grapes, and Heider simply loves alcohol. As Fern digs into her dessert, Frieren apologizes for not knowing more about Fern, handing Fern a gift. Pleasing Fern as Frieren remembered Fern's birthday. Fern smiles upon receiving a hair ornament, telling Frieren that it's enough of a birthday gift that Frieren remembered her birthday, confusing Frieren. The next day, the two leave the city, but as Fern walks alongside Frieren with her new hair ornament, Fern asks what the end goal of their adventures are. Frieren simply states that she's simply collecting as many spells as possible, but she does want to retrace her memories with the hero party, something Fern is curious about. When Fern walks beside Frieren, Frieren realizes that Fern is now 16 and taller than her, but gets jealous at how Fern has already outgrown her in other areas. In the Forest of Grobe, Frieren is seen testing out Fern's defensive spells, pointing out how the gaps in Fern's barrier will be her downfall. When Frieren fires multiple projectiles, Fern manages to block with a simple barrier around her body, but ultimately runs out of mana. As the two continue through the forest, Frieren reminds Fern that defensive magic is powerful, but it depletes mana very fast. Therefore, it's best to only cast barriers at the points of impact. As they both cross a river, Fern states that she simply needs to master a single defensive spell, but Frieren scolds her for not reading the book she gave her, as magic theory is just as important as practical applications. Finally arriving at a village, Fern wonders what spells Frieren intends to collect at the village, but Frieren states that she's here for other reasons. Upon approaching some villagers, a village elder immediately recognizes Frieren's white elven hair, leading Frieren to where Qual was sealed. Along the way, Frieren tells Fern that Qual is the Elder Sage of Corruption, a demon that terrorized people for 80 years, up until Himmel and his party sealed him. When Frieren wonders how the Elder knew who she was, the Elder reveals that Himmel would always visit up until his passing, and spoke highly of Frieren, stating that she would take over and watch the seal when Himmel himself was gone. Upon arriving at Qual's seal, Frieren confirms that the seal is indeed weakening, so Frieren will break the seal and defeat Qual the next day. With Fern and Frieren staying the night, Fern deduces that Frieren was the one that sealed Qual, wondering why the heroes chose to seal it over slaying it. Frieren reveals that their party were unable to defeat the demon, as Qual was a powerful mage, having invented the Zoltrak piercing spell, first of its kind that could pierce any sort of defense and destroy the target's body. Legend says that 40% of adventurers and 70% of mages were defeated by that single spell. But hearing something so powerful, Fern wonders how Qual could be defeated, but Frieren reveals such a powerful spell has its downsides. When Fern continues to ask more questions, Frieren scolds Fern for not reading the book she gave her, uttering that Fern will have her questions answered tomorrow. With the big day arriving, the two girls stand before Qual, only for Frieren to warn Fern to be on guard, all whilst Frieren lifts Qual's seal. Glad to be free, Qual learns that he's been sealed for 80 years and that the Demon King had been defeated in his absence. Annoyed, Qual proceeds to cast a Zoltrak, prompting Frieren to instruct Fern to erect a barrier, but when the dust clears, Fern's barrier manages to easily block Qual's killing spell. With Fern demanding to know why her basic barrier was able to block such a deadly spell, Frieren reveals that ever since Qual was sealed away, all of humankind had dedicated resources to studying and defending against the killing spell. After a few years, the humans incorporated said spells into their systems, and as a result, all types of defense magic were improved thanks to the demon. Amazed at what the humans were able to develop in the 80 years that he was sealed, Qual immediately begins analyzing Fern's barrier, noting how the barrier changes depending on the type of offensive magic, meaning the spell consumes a huge amount of mana. As Qual erupts with power, Frieren orders Fern to protect both of them as efficiently as possible, prompting Fern to erect barriers only in the location of Qual's projectiles. Unleashing a massive beam of magic, Qual is impressed that Fern is still able to block his overwhelming magic, But having forgotten about Frieren, Qual helplessly watches as Frieren casts her own Zoltrak killing spell. As Qual begins to disappear, Frieren and Fern head back to the village where Frieren is thanked by the village elder, grateful that they can now live in peace. When the elder hands Frieren his hat, Frieren recognizes the elder as the cheeky brat that flipped her skirt when they first sealed Qual. As the girls leave by carriage, Fern is seen finally reading the book Frieren gave her, but Frieren is glad that she could fulfill Himmel's trust and bring peace to the village once and for all. With the girls heading over to the Grand Channel, Frieren is sad to see the beach is littered with debris, unfortunate as the nearby village used to all clean the beach, but now there isn't enough manpower to tidy up the beach. The village elder requests that Frieren clean up the beach, handing Frieren a grimoire belonging to the legendary mage Flam. But Fern notices something suspicious. As Frieren accepts the offer, the elder leaves for now, but Fern states that she believes the grimoire is fake, something that Frieren already knows. Frieren is happy to see that Fern has been studying, revealing almost all books about Flam are usually fakes, but Frieren states that she needed an excuse to help return the beach to its former beauty. Skipping ahead to when snow has begun to fall, Fern is seen visiting a local bakery, chatting with the shopkeeper as Fern has been frequently purchasing bread from the bakery in the past 3 months. With Fern noting how it's already winter, Fern returns to a messy room, disappointed as Frieren is still asleep. As Frieren struggles to leave her bed, Fern is forced to help prepare, feed, and dress Frieren, dragging the sleepy elf through town and towards the beach. As the girls begin cleaning the beach, Fern points out how sloppy Frieren is, having been forced to take care of Frieren as if she were Frieren's mother. Fern wonders how Frieren behaved during her time with the hero party, but Frieren mentions how they were all very okay with Frieren oversleeping, but Frieren did get scolded once. With Fern curious to know more, the girls wrap up the day with a big fire using the debris, only to enjoy a nice dinner, reporting to the elder that they only have 1/3 of the job left. The elder wonders if the girls will be done by the New Year's festival, something Frieren says will be possible, but when the elder mentions how Frieren can finally join them and watch the sunset this time, Frieren acts awfully cold. The next day, Fern asks if the reason Frieren wanted to clean the beach was related to the festival, learning that every new year, the villagers would watch the sunrise. Frieren mentions how the beach is meant to beautifully reflect the sunrise, but admits that she never woke up early enough to actually watch the sunrise. With more time passing by, Fern continues to nurture our poor Frieren out of bed, both exploring the wrecked ships, discovering hidden gems, only to officially clean the beach of all debris. Completely mesmerized by the beach's beauty, the elder asks if Frieren will be joining them for the sunrise this year, shocking Fern when Frieren agrees to wake up early to see the sunrise. Fern wonders if Frieren will be able to wake up in time for the sunrise, but Frieren states that she'll simply stay up all night and that she wants to see what's so amazing about this sunrise. As Frieren stays up that night, she thinks about a time when Himmel had scolded Frieren for sleeping in and missed the New Year's sunrise in the same village. Confused as to why a mere sunrise would cause Himmel to be so upset they didn't get to see it together. Sadly, during the morning, Fern realized that Frieren is fast asleep, forced to drag Frieren out of bed, fearing that they'll miss the sunset. With both girls staring out into the horizon, Frieren notes how there is nothing special about the sunrise, but upon seeing that Fern is mesmerized by the sunrise's beauty, Frieren admits that Himmel was right, as she's enjoying the sunrise with Fern. Flashing back, we see Frieren and the hero party visiting the graves of Eisen's family, learning that his village was attacked by demons. Hyder chooses to kneel before the graves, praying for their souls to go to heaven, but Eisen mentions how he doesn't believe in the afterlife, prompting Frieren to reveal that thousands of years ago, everyone believed there was no afterlife. But since magic can't observe where souls go, it's hard to define what is truth and what isn't. Hyder states that since there is no actual proof for either side, Hyder likes to think there is a heaven. That way the people that are doing good for the world can at least pass believing that their life was worth it. With the hero party joining Hyder in praying for Eisen's family, we cut to the present where Eisen is once again praying for his family, currently located in the Brett region. Out of nowhere, Frieren calls out to Eisen, weird as they haven't spoken to each other ever since Himmel passed away 30 years ago. As they all sit down for some tea, Eisen is shocked to see Frieren has an apprentice, but Frieren asks if Eisen needs help with anything. Eisen mentions how Hyder and himself had been updating each other with letters. Heading out, they all head to Volume 50 Basin, a location Frieren recognizes, learning that Eisen intends to search for notes from Flam, the legendary mage. When Frieren reminds Eisen that most records on Flam are fake, Eisen reveals that Hyder had figured out the general location of Flam's true notes, based on records from the Holy City. With Frieren convinced, they all agree to start looking for a massive tree. But upon seeing Fern disappointed, Frieren states that they should hurry, surprising Eisen as Frieren never cared for anyone else's time. With the gang beginning to search the entire forest, they spend the night eating and sleeping in the forest, only to search across the sea and in the skies. One day, Fern states that she has found a massive tree near some ruins, all beginning to head towards the tree. But Frieren uses the opportunity to ask Eisen why he's searching for Flam's notes. Eisen reveals that on the day of Himmel's death, Eisen had seen how regretful Frieren felt for not using more time to get to know Himmel, revealing that the notes left behind were said to allow contact with the dead. When Frieren states that she doesn't believe in such nonsense, Eisen states that it's better to know for sure. Plus, Eisen and Hyder had agreed prior to help Frieren get to know Himmel better. Having made it to the massive tree, Fern states that there is a powerful barrier surrounding the tree. But when Frieren heads over to inspect the tree, she utters that even after 1,000 years, her master is still superior to her. Flashing back, Frieren is seen with her master, wondering why her master is so fixated on protecting a small sapling. But her master states that in 1,000 years' time, Frieren will grow to appreciate it, asking Frieren to trust in her teachings, especially since Frieren's master was Flam, the legendary mage. Within an instant, Frieren dispels the barrier guarding the entrance to Flam's notes. Upon glancing at the notes, Frieren is surprised the notes had already been opened to the page regarding communication with the dead, surprised her master knew Frieren would return. Flam's notes recount that the north of the continent housed the land of Oriole, where all the souls rest, a location that Flam had used to speak with her fallen allies. When Fern wonders if the notes can be trusted, Eisen reminds Frieren to consider the best-case scenario when unsure, prompting Frieren to reveal that Oriole is in the same direction as Indy, the current Demon King Castle. With Eisen asking Frieren to go for Himmel's sake, they all head back home via carriage, where Frieren is fast asleep, dreading the thought of going to such a cold place like the Demon King's castle. Sparking up a conversation, Eisen asks how Frieren is treating Fern, impressed to hear that Frieren is retracing her adventures with the hero party, but is also trying to get to know Fern better. Hearing this, Eisen thinks back to how cold Frieren was back then, having never imagined Frieren would take on Apprentice, but reassures Fern that Frieren is a great teacher. As they all return to Eisen's home, Eisen apologizes for not coming with them, checking to see if Frieren remembers the path to Indy, relieved to hear Frieren still remembers it to be through the Will region, across the Regal Canyon, and past the Northern Land checkpoints. As Frieren begins to leave, Eisen informs Fern that it'll be a 10-year adventure, reminding Frieren of her adventure with the hero party, but Frieren states that it won't take too long. As Fern leaves with Frieren, Fern thinks about how she spent half her life with Frieren, flashing back to one of Fern's last conversations with Hyder. Hyder jokes about haunting Fern if she doesn't behave around Frieren, but Fern surprises Hyder with how mature she's grown, making Hyder promise to visit her when he passes. With Fern resting by Frieren's side, the girls ride a carriage to the nearby town of the Will region. But as the girls head through town, they're stopped by a shopkeeper that warns the girls not to go into the mountains. The shopkeeper says there are rumors of ghosts taking people away, but when Frieren gets curious about what type of ghosts, the girls head around town asking for everyone's stories. Apparently, the townsfolk saw ghosts of their departed family in the mountains, with some people saying that the ghosts spoke. When Fern wonders if it is the work of undeads, Frieren states that undeads wouldn't appear as ghosts, as undeads normally appear in the form of rotting corpses or skeletons. With the girls heading to the rooms, Fern notes how Frieren probably knows what is causing the ghosts to appear in the mountains, but is cut off when Frieren states that they'll only be staying for a single night in town. Fern demands that Frieren help out the villagers, but seeing Fern so serious about helping the villagers, Frieren agrees to help. As both girls head into the mountains, they explore the locations of said disappearances, where Frieren quizzes Fern on what type of magic created the ghosts, satisfied to hear Fern believes it's illusion magic. Heading deeper into the mountains, Fern briefly remembers a monster that used illusion magic to hunt its prey. A monster Frieren states is the Einsam. The Einsam usually uses illusion magic, creating phantoms of people's loved ones to lure them and only to devour the targets. Luckily, Frieren mentions how the Einsam's illusion magic can be easily destroyed by a mage's projectile, but warns Fern that it may be difficult, as Frieren had to destroy the illusions of her master begging for her life. Upon entering a misty forest, Frieren orders Fern to prepare for the worst, only for Fern to spot an illusion of Hyder in the distance. Preparing to destroy the illusion, Fern suddenly hears Hyder speak fondly of her, realizing the monster is using Fern's memories to put Fern at ease. When Frieren tries to help Fern out, Frieren suddenly spots an illusion of Himmel, surprised as she was expecting an illusion of her master. Wondering if she has changed, Frieren nonchalantly destroys Himmel's illusion, clearing the misty forest and revealing the Einsam to Fern, prompting Fern to disintegrate Hyder's illusion and the monster. As Frieren reassures Fern that Hyder won't be mad that Fern struck an illusion of him, the girls head into the Regal Canyon, spotting a massive crimson dragon along with its nest, where Frieren spots the grimoire she's been looking for. Frieren states that dragons use magic-infused items to build their nest, asking Fern to take out the solar dragon. But when Fern conjures a powerful spell, her spell simply deflects off the dragon's thick exterior. With the dragon now awake, Frieren cries that they should flee, forcing Fern to lure away the dragon. But having barely managed to lose the dragon, Fern cries that as mages they will have a hard time defeating the dragon. Frieren acknowledges Fern's cries, uttering that they'll need some help as we flash back to when Frieren and Eisen were camping out in the forest. Eisen states that he has an apprentice of his own by the name of Stark, stating that he'll be a great frontliner for Frieren's adventures and that Stark lives in the village near the Regal Canyon. As the girls visit the nearby town, they wonder why the villagers aren't more afraid of the dragon, but Fern asks why Frieren wants the grimoire so badly. Frieren reveals that the grimoire has a spell that allows mages to see through clothes, weirding Fern out. But out of nowhere, an old lady states that Stark wants to meet the girls. Surprised, the girls follow the old lady, learning that 3 years ago the Crimson Dragon had massacred their town. But luckily Stark had arrived, scaring the dragon away, and ever since has been protecting their town. Upon arriving near a massive rocky wall, Stark is seen playing with some town kids, only to greet Frieren and Fern, asking them to not agitate the dragon so much. Stark tries to point out that he received a mark from the dragon in the past, but Frieren simply asks for Stark to drop the act. When Stark learns that Frieren used to adventure with Eisen, Stark asks for the old lady and kids to give them some privacy, revealing that he's proud that he abandoned Eisen. Frieren asks why Stark doesn't just slay the dragon, but Stark wants to know why the girls are here, learning that they've come to recruit Stark and also want the grimoire in the dragon's nest. Stark gets confused as to why Frieren wants the grimoire so badly, but doesn't mind joining Frieren's party, but reveals that he has had trouble defeating the dragon, asking for Frieren's help. Frieren states that they can defeat the dragon together if Stark distracts the dragon for 30 seconds. But upon seeing Stark refuse such an offer, Frieren deduces that Stark has never fought a monster before. Stark breaks down, begging for Frieren's help, admitting that when he first confronted the dragon, he was so scared seeing the beast, but strangely after a while the dragon flew away, and Stark was praised by the villagers. With Fern disgusted by how pathetic Stark looks, Frieren states that she has full faith in Stark, heading over to the massive fissure in the nearby wall, only to realize something about the fissure. As the girls leave, Frieren states that they'll be meeting back here tomorrow, hinting at the fact that Stark should use this opportunity to grow. That night, Frieren and Fern enjoy a nice dinner, all whilst the villagers praise Stark for being a kind person. Fern still can't help but see Stark as a cowardly boy, but Frieren brings up the first time Fern fought a monster, apologizing for teasing Fern. With the girls heading back to their inn, Fern wonders why the dragon doesn't just attack the village, but Frieren hints at the fact that it may be Stark, suggesting that Fern visit Stark if she's curious about who he is. With Fern heading to visit Stark, Frieren sits in her room, thinking back to when she had asked Eisen if Stark is strong. Eisen reveals that Stark was the only person to have fled like a coward when the monsters attacked his hometown, someone Eisen states is exactly like himself. Hence he taught Stark everything he knew. In the dead of night, Stark is seen wielding his axe, cleaving it into the rocky wall, digging a deeper and deeper fissure with every swing. With Stark standing before the giant fissure, Stark turns to spot Fern behind him, having just been caught for creating the massive fissure. Fern asks why Stark doesn't just slay the dragon terrorizing the nearby village, but Stark states that since the dragon hasn't attacked yet, there is no need for him to slay the beast. As Stark begins to leave, Fern asks if Stark will slay the dragon when it does attack. Learning that although Stark knows the village depends on him, he still might consider running if the dragon is too great. Stark reveals that he had gained a mark on his face during a spar with his master Ison, believing that Ison was mad at him as Ison never praised Stark. Leaning in to inspect Stark's hand, Fern concludes that Stark would never run from a fight, confusing Stark as he wonders how Fern would know. Fern reveals that on her first battle with a deadly monster, Fern had begun to flee in terror, but when she realized Frieren wouldn't help her, Fern had no choice but to steel her resolve and fight. Fern states that although Stark is a coward, she believes Stark will rise to the challenge to protect the village when the time comes, something that makes Stark think about Ison. Fern is seen reporting her chat with Stark to Frieren, but when Frieren heads to the fissure to look for Stark the next day, she's disappointed to see that Stark has fled the scene. When Frieren states that they'll be slaying the dragon instead, Fern refuses to leave the safety of a nearby tree, but out of nowhere Stark appears, asking if he only needs to distract the dragon for 30 seconds. Stark states that if he were to pass away during the battle, Stark asks for Frieren to guarantee the dragon is slayed, confusing Frieren as to why Stark is willing to give his life for the safety of the village. Stark reminds Frieren that he lived in the village for 3 years, cutting to later that day, where the three are now standing before the red dragon, prompting Frieren to tease Stark for shaking out of fear. Frieren reveals that Ison showed the same fear before a great fight, as Ison would embrace the fear, something Frieren sees in Stark. Hearing that his master also would fear his battles, Stark marches into the range of the dragon, but Frieren notes that the dragon is being cautious as to not attack due to the enemy it's facing. As the dragon unleashes its fiery breath, Stark begins making his way towards the dragon, ducking and weaving until he's able to close the distance between himself and the beast. Flashing back, Frieren asks why Ison had hit Stark during their last spar, but Ison reveals that he feels terrible for hitting his student. But in the moment, Ison had sensed immense power from Stark, a power that caused Ison himself to shake. As Frieren watches Stark shatter the claws of the dragon, Stark chooses to stay close to the dragon, grabbing onto it as it takes off. Being flung into the air, Stark senses that the dragon is lining up another breath of fire, swiftly gripping his axe, only to cleave the dragon into the ground. Seeing an opening, Stark cries for Fern and Frieren to finish off the dragon, but Frieren stops Fern from making a move, declaring that Stark had soloed the dragon. Shocked at his own power, Frieren rushes to congratulate Stark on his first battle. But more importantly, Frieren is excited to steal all the loot in the dragon's nest. Seeing Frieren fixated on the random items, Stark mentions how Ison would always talk about how Frieren made their hero's journey ridiculous and fun, cutting back to a time when Frieren had decided to make shaved ice in a dungeon. Ison had grown annoyed as they were wasting so much time, but Himmel reminds Ison that they have all the time in the world, so they should enjoy the journey as they go. As the three return to tell the village the good news, they all begin heading out, only to try out the grimoire. Fern uses the spell to see through Stark's clothes, disgusted that he's so small, but Stark states that he'll be joining Frieren and Fern on their future journeys. In the fortress city of Vol located in the Regal Canyon, Frieren and gang are refused entry towards one of the northern checkpoints by the guard, hearing that monsters are more active than ever. As the guard heads to chat with the Castellan, they warn the gang not to cause trouble in the town, but Frieren is perfectly okay with staying in town, planning on exploring the magic shops in town. Seeing Fern's cold glare, Frieren states that she'll head over to book them a room, but when Stark offers to get food with Fern, Fern's glare sends Stark in search of food alone. Now alone, Fern overhears that the Northern Army plans to defeat the enemies in 2 years, meaning their checkpoint won't be open for another 2 years. Cutting to Stark, he has entered a familiar tavern, served the Jumbo Berry special dessert, confused as he used to split the dessert with Ison, but now the dessert looks so small. Stark notes how he has gotten bigger, having saw his master's broad shoulders as something to admire, but after some time, he outgrew his master. Out of nowhere, Fern appears, eyeing down Stark's dessert, but instead Fern chooses to order a glass of milk, diligently sitting next to Stark. Fern asks how Stark would feel staying in the city for 2 more years, relieved to hear that Stark thinks it's annoying as well, but Stark gets weirded out by how Fern is acting. Both heading outside to assess the walls, Stark asks if they could simply fly over the gates, but Fern reminds Stark that a barrier has been erected to prevent flying monsters from entering. With no other choice, they head over to the Merchants Guild, but are sad to learn that all trades towards the northern land have been shut down, meaning that they can't sneak out via that way either. Coming up with another idea, the two decide to visit the Black Market and Thieves Guild, using Stark's connections and demeanor to find a solution, but sadly there is still nothing that can be done. As the two stand above the walls overlooking the view, Fern wonders why Stark is being so cooperative, deducing that Stark has an ulterior motive to leave the walls. But Stark simply utters that he's running out of time. Stark mentions how Ison and himself visited this exact location when he was younger, telling Stark stories about how he visited the northern lands with his hero party and had enjoyed every second of the 10-year journey. Stark reveals that he intends on having a great journey with Fern and Frieren, promising to return and repay Ison with stories of his own before Ison passes. As both return to town, Fern spots Frieren acting strange, cornering Frieren in an alley only to learn that the town's guards are looking for Frieren. Out of nowhere, the same guard at the checkpoint kneels to apologize to Frieren, prompting the Castellan of the city to apologize as well for his guard being so rude to Frieren. When Frieren reassures the Castellan that she wasn't offended, the Castellan believes that Frieren is here to slay the remnants of the Demon Lord's army, permitting Frieren to pass through the checkpoint. But this disappoints Frieren, with the town throwing a massive celebration to acknowledge Frieren and her party's departure. Frieren mentions how she never liked the outlandish welcomes and departures. Stark wonders if this is how Ison felt, making Frieren suddenly remember a similar time when she departed with the hero party, curious as to what parallels will arise next. Flashing back, Frieren is seen walking alongside the hero party, all discussing the validity of Flamme's grimoire, especially with the countless fakes and imitations that exist. Waking up early, Frieren spots Stark and Fern making breakfast, shocking Fern as this is a rare scenario. Later that day on a road, the gang were tasked with clearing a path for a merchant, grateful as the road had been blocked off due to a landslide. When Stark sees Frieren's magic, he wonders why Frieren doesn't just carry the merchant's cart over with magic. But Fern is strongly for helping everyone, not just the single merchant. Taking a quick break, Stark thanks the merchant for the water, wondering what may have caused the landslide, surprised to hear that it must have been the skirmishes between the northern lands and the demons. Getting back to work, Fern requests that Stark help her out a bit, but Stark asks that Fern be more casual with him. But when Fern tries speaking with Stark more casually, Stark gets insulted, annoying Fern as they continue to work. With the road cleared, the merchant offers to lead the gang to the nearby village, amazed that he finally got to meet an elf. Frieren acknowledges that although elves live long lives, elves are slowly going extinct, as most don't intend on reproducing, with the most recent elf Frieren met being around 400 years ago. Finally arriving at the town, the gang spot a line of merchants lining up to enter the town, learning that tonight is the Liberation Festival. The festival is meant to commemorate the hero party ridding the area of demons, and involves decorating the statues of the heroes in town. Frieren still can't understand why humans throw parties, but the merchant reminds Frieren that it's been 80 years since the Demon King was slayed, and in human years, 80 years is a whole lifetime. Flashing back, Frieren remembers a time when Himmel had requested that their statues be placed through various towns, annoying Frieren as she believed Himmel simply wanted to show off. But Himmel reveals that the statues are meant to remind Frieren of their adventures together as the hero party. That night, the gang stand among the crowd, watching as the hero party is celebrated, but the merchant does note how Frieren looks very similar to the elf statue. The next morning, they continue their journey, heading to the Graf Granat's domain, where they notice an abundance of guards surveying the town. When Frieren wonders who should do the shopping, Frieren suddenly freezes, equipping her staff, only to state that she senses demons approaching. When some demons turn the nearby corner, they spot Frieren charging up a spell, but luckily a nearby knight tackles and stops Frieren from firing the spell. Approaching Frieren, the demon asks if Graf Granat had hired Frieren to attack him, but Graf states that he's not foolish enough to attack Lord Lugner out in the open, especially since Lugner is her seeking peace. Kneeling down, Lugner states that he senses Frieren's bloodlust-filled glare, shaming Frieren for looking at him as if he were a wild beast. Frieren fires back, stating that Lugner is simply using human speech to blend in and manipulate the humans. But having heard enough, Frieren is dragged away to be locked up. With Stark and Fern shocked at what just happened, they choose to visit Frieren, who is locked up in the dungeon under the mansion. Frieren states that she'll only be locked up for a measly 2 to 3 years, but Fern scolds Frieren for always wanting to waste time. Frieren asks who the peace envoy demons are, learning that the envoys are linked to Aura, the guillotine, one of the 7 sages of destruction who served the Demon King. Apparently, 28 years ago, Aura had regained her strength and had been fighting with the domain of Graf Granats. But now Aura has sent envoys to seek peace, something Frieren states sounds fishy. When Stark wonders why they can't just talk things out with the demons, Frieren questions if Stark or Fern know how demons learn to speak the human language, revealing that demons only eat humans. During her time with the hero party, Himmel and Frieren were forced to hunt down a child demon, having supposedly devoured the child of the human couple. But when Himmel went to slay the creature, Himmel hesitated since the demon behaved just like a child. When Frieren offered to shoulder the burden, the town's chief had ordered everyone to spare the demon, giving it a second chance. But that was something Frieren had advised everyone against doing. With days passing, the chief had given the demon girl a place to stay along with food to eat, but Frieren kept a close eye on her, all whilst the chief and her daughter considered the demon girl as one of their own. One day, the chief's building was burnt down by the demon girl, and the chief ended up passing due to being attacked by the demon. When Himmel demands to know why the demon killed the chief, the demon slowly approaches the couple of the first daughter she ate, offering the chief's daughter as a replacement. Sensing that the humans hate her, the demon girl takes the chief's daughter as hostage, but Himmel easily recaptures the chief's daughter, permitting Frieren to slay the demon. When Frieren fires an incineration spell at the demon, Frieren states that demons don't have a sense of family, forced to live and roam alone since birth. But on that day, Frieren learned that the demon girl had intentionally manipulated everyone, knowing that she would get to live a little longer. Frieren states that Flam described monsters that can speak as demons, as they imitate human speech to lure other humans in, something Stark and Fern find disturbing. As Stark and Fern leave, we cut to Lugner, sitting in the mansion and waiting for a meeting with Graf. Lugner admits that Frieren was right about demons, curious as to where he recognizes Frieren from, stating that demons will forever hunt down humans. With Frieren suspecting that the town won't last too long, we follow Lugner and his followers enter Grafson's bedroom, learning that Grafson was gifted a sword by the king, but had passed away 10 years ago whilst fighting Aura. Raising his son's sword to Lugner's neck, Graf reveals that he has brought Lugner here to slaughter him. But upon glancing around the room, Lugner notices that Graf has been keeping his son's room clean for the past 10 years. Lugner utters that the humans slayed his father, reminding Graf that they've come here to stop unnecessary bloodshed, ultimately convincing Graf and his knights to lower their blades. With Graf sending Lugner and his followers to the guest room, Lugner admits that he doesn't know what a father is, but has identified Graf as an empathetic man. Lugner states that he'll grow close to Graf and have him lower the town's defensive barrier, and only then will Lady Aura's forces conquer the town. Lugner suddenly notices Drat is missing, learning from Liney that Drat has disappeared to eliminate an obstacle, cutting to Drat entering the underground dungeons, slaying a guard only to enter Frieren's cell. Drat declares that he's here to kill Frieren, knowing that Frieren is the only loose end that can ruin their scheme. But Frieren coldly warns Drat that she is stronger than Aura herself. Smirking, Drat doubts Frieren's strength, dragging her into the air with a single wire around her neck, impressed that Frieren had encased her neck with mana to prevent her decapitation. Drat states that his wires are the strongest amongst all the demons, tugging harder on the spell, but Frieren still manages to defend her neck. When Frieren admits defeat, Drat smirks, but Frieren scolds Drat for letting his guard down, suddenly cutting off one of Drat's arms. When Drat tries to bind Frieren with multiple wires, Frieren simply severs Drat's other arm, instantly slaying Drat before he can speak. Frieren states that she'll simply slay the other two demons and convince Graf that the demons are evil, but upon exiting her cell, Frieren discovers the guard Graf had dispatched. Cutting to Stark and Fern, they enjoy a nice meal in the peaceful town, both shoveling down their food, as they realize they need to convince Graf to free Frieren before any harm befalls the town. Stark notes how earlier he could sense Lugner's immense power. Pissed that Lugner didn't even pay attention to Stark, as Lugner knew he could dismantle everyone but Frieren in mere seconds. Beginning to shake out of fear, Stark accidentally spills his drink on himself, offered a handkerchief by Fern. As Stark cleans himself up, they both agree that they need to head over to protect Graf in case the demons attack. But when Stark tries to return the handkerchief, Fern prefers Stark keep it. Following Liney and Lugner, Liney reports that she can no longer sense Drat nearby, curious as to who Frieren is, but out of nowhere Graf and his knights rush into the room. Graf reports that Frieren has escaped, prompting Lugner to offer up Liney's location magic, but Graf refuses, asking where Drat is. When Lugner tries to come up with an excuse, Graf has his men surround Lugner and Liney, revealing that he knows Frieren is a powerful mage, demanding once more to know where Drat is. With no other option, Lugner draws his own blood, instantly decapitating all the knights in the room, only to turn his attention to Graf. Lugner reveals how excited he is to finally be killing, nonchalantly pricking his own finger on Graf's sword, only to use the blood to pierce Graf's stomach. With Graf bleeding out, Lugner states they need Graf to help remove the town's barrier. Cutting to later that evening, where Stark and Fern are walking through town, only for Fern to detect Frieren in a disguise. Fern asks why Frieren escaped, learning that Frieren disposed of one of Lugner's demons, but had to escape since the guard outside her door was killed, and Frieren didn't want to be blamed for slaying the guard, since demon corpses dissipate into mana and leave behind no trace. Frieren states that she'll be leaving town, but Fern and Stark remind Frieren that there are still demons in town, making Frieren suggest that Fern and Stark handle the demons in town. Seeing the two unsure about their skills, Frieren reassures the two that they'll be fine, inspiring Fern to drag the cowardly Stark towards the demons. At the same time, Frieren detects a powerful ball of mana 10 kilometers from town watching them, deducing that it must be Aura the guillotine, but knowing that Aura is strong, Frieren reasons she should finish this quickly. In the dead of night, Fern and Stark sneak past a body of water, heading over the walls of Graf's mansion, only to enter into the mansion through one of its windows. At the same time, Lugner tells Graf about his love for magic, revealing that most demons spend their entire life researching and honing their own particular magic. But Lugner does acknowledge how strange magic is, admiring Flam's unique barrier that prevents any type of demon from entering. Lugner speculates that Flam's genius barrier casted 1,000 years ago is stronger than any present spell, but since Graf and his Granat family has maintained the barrier for generations, Lugner demands to know how to control the barriers, leaving Lugner to consider his options. Lugner orders Liney to search for any grimoires in the bedroom, whilst he searches the study room. Seeing an opening, Stark sneaks into Graf's room, attempting to free Graf, but his trembling hands fail to cut the magic binds around Graf. Graf asks Stark to take his Granat amulet and flee with the citizens, but Stark refuses, stating that he won't leave Graf behind. Out of nowhere, Lugner and Liney reappear, demanding to know if Graf knows Stark, but Graf simply states he's a lost child. When Lugner agrees to let Stark flee, Graf feels bad, spotting how much Stark is trembling, but Stark gets annoyed that Lugner is underestimating him. Gripping his axe, Stark dashes behind Lugner, managing to land a slash, but Lugner simply uses his blood to repel Stark backwards, conjuring a massive blood hand to pin Stark to the ground. Lugner praises Stark for trying to fight him solo, but Stark reveals that Fern has been with them undetected, giving Fern an opening to land a powerful spell onto Lugner. With Lugner confused as to how Fern avoided Liney's detection, Lugner demands to know what spell he was hit with, shocked to hear that Fern had learned the killing spell Zoltrak. Lugner utters the ordinary demon Zoltrak spell shouldn't have damaged him so badly, but Fern ignores his stalling, preparing to finish off Lugner, but Liney steps up to fight. Stark reasons that they should get Graf some help first, both fleeing with Graf for now, but Lugner reveals that his blood is on Fern and Stark so they can chase them after he's healed up. Liney offers to hunt them down herself, but Lugner reveals that Fern's Zoltrak spell has been modified to a demon-killing spell, a modification of Zoltrak that specializes in slaying demons. Seeing Fern's silhouette earlier, Lugner remembers an elf by the name of Frieren, being the person that helped analyze the initial Zoltrak spell, but was also granted the title, Frieren the Slayer, for most demons slayed in all of history. As Frieren descends upon Aura and her army, Stark and Fern have managed to get Graf some help, grateful as he promises to pardon Frieren, as Frieren was right to not trust the demons all along. Stark gets excited as Frieren can now roam through town freely, but Graf hears that Frieren was the elf from the original hero party, disgraced to have imprisoned one of the saviors of his family's land. Greeting Aura, Frieren acknowledges that it's been 80 years since they last fought, asking if Aura would retreat now. Smirking, Aura has some of her men slash at Frieren, but Frieren nonchalantly dodges, noting that Aura has more puppets than before. Frieren knows how only powerful demons with enough magic can control an army, but Frieren does despise how disgusting Aura's magic is, recognizing some of the suits of armor being controlled, declaring that she'll kill Aura once and for all. As Aura takes out her scale of obedience, we cut to Graf explaining the reason why Aura is one of the 7 sages of destruction, revealing that her scale allows Aura to weigh her soul's mana capacity with another, and the soul with the greater mana capacity gains control of the other for eternity. Fern asks if there is a counter, but Graf does mention how the scale does judge fairly. So the only way is to have someone with a greater mana capacity face Aura, but this hasn't been done in the past 500 years. Graf also reveals that souls with great wills can temporarily break the mind control, but Stark knows that it's a temporary solution, since Aura would simply get rid of those with strong wills to avoid any loose ends. As Frieren continues to dodge and evade Aura's army, Aura grows amused seeing Frieren dancing around, but Frieren enchants her staff, immediately freeing the men around her from Aura's curse. Shocked, Aura notes how Frieren must have used a lot of mana to break her curse, wondering why Frieren would use such a delicate tactic when Frieren can simply blast away the suits of armor. Frieren reveals that Himmel had scolded Frieren in the past for harming the cursed armors. Therefore, Frieren will make sure to wipe out Aura for good. At the same time, we hear the priest reassure everyone that the church they are in is protected by a strong barrier, giving Stark a reason to head out. Stark states that it won't be long before Lugner and Liney recover, and seeing as they are no match for the demons anyway, Stark states he'll go and seek Frieren's help. At first, Fern gets annoyed at how cowardly Stark sounds, but after some thought, Fern agrees to help evacuate everyone while Stark goes to get Frieren. On the town walls, Stark hands Fern Graf's amulet that'll help convince people to work with her. But when Fern feels bad seeing Stark all bloodied up, Fern suddenly realizes something, tossing her blood-stained coat over the wall. Detecting that someone else's blood is on Stark, Fern is suddenly pinned to a nearby wall by Lugner's blood, all whilst Liney rushes Stark, conjuring an axe only to isolate Stark. Stark demands to know why Liney moves like Eisen, all whilst Lugner apologizes for not killing Fern instantly, mocking Fern's grin as he states that demons can conceal their mana as well. Annoyed at how much Lugner is talking, Fern asks for Lugner to simply finish her off, but Lugner is more curious as to how strong Stark is, amused to hear that Stark is Eisen the hero's best student. Lugner also demands to know where Frieren is, not convinced to hear that Frieren simply fled town, knowing that Frieren wouldn't simply leave knowing there's still demons in town. As Lugner racks his brain, he suspects that Frieren will be dealing with Aura, but Fern suddenly calls for her staff, setting herself free, only to demand Lugner not move. Fern states that Lugner is arrogant, believing that no other human but Frieren is worthy of facing him. But when Fern states she'll blast a hole through Lugner's body, Lugner welcomes Fern to try. Flashing back, Fern and Frieren are seen finishing off some demons, making Fern ask how she compares to Frieren. Frieren states that Fern's mana and technique will never be able to reach Frieren's level since she has lived much longer than Fern. But Frieren admits that Fern's cast speed surpasses her own. As Lugner turns around, Fern manages to fire off a spell, surprising Lugner, as he would have died if he didn't move first. Seeing as Lugner protected his heart, Fern deduces that a demon's heart is their weak point, only to spot Lugner releasing an array of blood. Following Liney and Stark, Liney mentions how disappointing it is that Stark is already defeated, but gets excited seeing Stark refuse to stay down. Even though Lugner has greater control of his magic, each attack Lugner makes, Fern manages to evade and counter. Seeing as he's being overwhelmed, Lugner attempts to exhaust Fern's mana. But as Lugner notices Fern slowly chipping away at his defenses, Lugner orders Liney to finish off Stark and help him out. Liney gets annoyed at how passive Stark is, managing to land a deadly slash to Stark's eye. But Stark is more curious as to how Liney knows Eisen's fighting style. Liney reveals that she can copy any movement once she has seen it, replacing her axe with a sword, only to dash forward. With Stark continuing to defend, Liney once again exchanges her sword for a spear, tossing the spear towards Stark only to scare Stark when Liney barely scrapes Stark's neck with a dagger. Liney says that she recognized Stark's movements to be similar to the great hero Eisen, leaping over Stark only to cleave down with an axe. Since Liney is a perfect copy of Eisen, Stark knows he'll eventually lose, ultimately failing to defend, only to be slammed into the ground. As Stark's body lays limp, Liney heads to assist Lugner, but Stark is still barely conscious, remembering his time training with Eisen. When Stark states that he'll never be as strong as Eisen, Eisen says he agrees, but instructs Stark to continue to get up and never falter against strong warriors. That way Stark will never truly be defeated. With Stark forcing his body up, Liney advises Stark to stay down, but Stark states that he's still not done, remembering that Eisen's slashes were far stronger than Liney's. As Fern and Lugner's magic erupt across the skies, Stark rushes Liney, leaving himself wide open for Liney to land a lethal blow to his stomach. When Liney fails to cut through Stark's tough body, Stark uses the chance to completely shred the left side of Liney's body, but realizing that Liney has been defeated, Lugner checks to see what happened, allowing Fern to land the demon-killing spell on Lugner's heart. Flashing back, Frieren walks behind Flam, who asks if Frieren remembers the dying words of Basalt, reminding Frieren that demons' words only deceive, meaning people must use unfair tactics to ensure demons are erased. With Lugner accepting his own demise, he's at least happy to hear that Frieren is currently facing off against Aura, believing that since Frieren isn't with her hero party, Frieren will finally fall against Aura. Hearing this, Fern states that Frieren will win, but not in an honorable way, surprising Lugner as he believes Frieren to be an honorable elf. Barely able to manipulate his blood, Lugner finds it weird that Fern's mana output is so low compared to his, suddenly realizing the underhand tactics Fern used to defeat Lugner. But Fern doesn't waste time silencing Lugner. Cutting back, we see Flam stumble upon a ruined village, saddened to see that demons had raided the village, and all that's left is Basalt the Throned Shell, a once leader in the Demon King army. Spotting a single person alive in the village, Flam asks a younger Frieren if she was the one that slaughtered all the demons, amused to sense Frieren's overflowing mana capacity. Flam scolds Frieren for facing the demons head-on, reminding Frieren that she should fight with surprise attacks. But before Flam can leave, Frieren states that Flam and herself are pretty alike, able to sense that Flam has an even greater mana pool than herself. Impressed, Flam begins carrying Frieren on her back, declaring that Frieren will be her apprentice moving forward, but Frieren refuses. Flam reminds Frieren that she'll probably die if she's left alone, suddenly sensing that they're being followed by even greater demons than Basalt. Flam notes how the demons concealed their mana, preparing for a sneak attack, but upon realizing that Frieren and Flam were mages, they chose to pridefully reveal themselves. The demons order Flam to leave the elf behind, but seeing as she has no reason to refuse, Flam sets Frieren down, but reminds Frieren that the demons are very cocky and proud. In an instant, Flam lets out an explosion, completely wiping away the demons, shocking Frieren as Flam had concealed her true mana output, only to surprise and slay the demons with her true power. Flam admits that the tactic is quite frowned upon, but taking Frieren home, Flam is happy to see that Frieren is recovering quite quickly. Heading through a forest, Flam and Frieren both reveal that they despise demons, having both lost their loved ones to demons, but they also both love magic. Flam suggests that only the two of them should become cowards when it comes to magic, instructing Frieren to first cut down her mana output to only 1/10, impressing Flam to see Frieren learn very fast. Flam says that they'll go over the basics first, instructing Frieren to continue to mislead demons for the rest of her life. But as we cut back to Aura, she realizes that Lugner and Liney have been dispatched. Frieren utters that Aura has failed her mission, prompting Aura to settle for taking Frieren's life, unveiling her scale of obedience as Aura knows Frieren has drastically depleted her mana during battle. Frieren knows the scale will force the person with a lower mana capacity to bend to the will of the greater mana holder, commending Aura for exuding an overwhelming mana pool, having lived and trained for 500 years. Frieren does admit that it appears that Aura has the greater mana pool, but mentions how demons are incapable of suppressing their mana pool, flashing back to when Frieren had asked Flam why that is so. Flam states that demons are quite simple creatures, just like how humans use wealth to show status. Demons use their mana output to show dominance over other demons. Flam does note how demons will temporarily conceal their mana to hide their intentions, but during battle demons have no reason but to flaunt their overwhelming mana, something Frieren hears she can use against the demons. Having been 3 years since they met, Flam is happy to see that Frieren had easily been able to conceal her magic consistently. But in a blink of an eye, another 50 years pass by. Having a private chat with Frieren, Flam is happy to have taught Frieren all she knows, wondering if one day Frieren may be able to slay the Demon King himself. Taking the chance, Flam asks that Frieren plant flowers around her grave, revealing it to be the spell her parents taught her and is the reason Flam loves magic. With Frieren asking to learn the spell, Flam advises that Frieren remain hidden until she defeats the Demon King, prompting Frieren to uphold her promises when Flam passes away. Now alone, Frieren explores the continent, continuing to train her mana and live in secrecy, all whilst a nearby town fully develops. One day, Himmel, Eisen, and Hyder visit the nearby woods, running into Frieren, having heard that Frieren is a wise elf, but Frieren reassures the party that she is nothing special. Asking the party to leave, Frieren hears that Himmel suspects Frieren is far stronger than she is letting on, giving Frieren enough reason to begin adventuring with her new hero party. Having activated her scale, a dense ball of mana for both Frieren and Aura appear, prompting Frieren to ask if Aura is truly confident she'll win. Smirking, Aura recounts how Frieren had only made a name for herself 80 years ago alongside the hero party, scoffing at Frieren's shameful mana output as it has remained the same since they last met. With Aura's mana ultimately tipping the scale in her favor, Aura prepares to sever Frieren's head, but strangely, the scale begins to tip in Frieren's favor. Frieren takes the chance to point out how simple-minded Aura is, revealing that she had been concealing her mana all this time, shocking Aura as she calls Frieren's bluff. Frieren praises her Master Flam for teaching her such a tactic, scaring Aura, as although Aura has lived for 500 years, Frieren has lived for over 1,000, finally unleashing her true monstrous mana output. Horrified to have been deceived, Aura ultimately is forced to yield to Frieren's commands, ordered to take her own life as Frieren leaves the scene. Returning by sunrise, Frieren prays for the fallen soldiers who are finally free from their eternal curse, meeting up with Fern and Stark, happy to report that Frieren has been excused of all crimes. As Graf thanks Frieren for preserving the bodies of the past heroes, Frieren explains that Himmel had instructed Frieren to treat the dead with respect, but Frieren also congratulates Fern and Stark for successfully defeating powerful demons. Graf asks for a burial for all the fallen, only to spot a familiar-looking pendant, grateful to Frieren for preserving what was left of his son. As a reward, Graf agrees to give Frieren with anything of her choosing, surprised to hear that Frieren simply wants the Grimoire Flam the mage left behind detailing the town's barrier. Luckily, both Frieren and Graf agree that the Grimoire is a fake, but Frieren could care less, prompting Graf to ask that Frieren be more casual around him. Frieren says she prefers not to, as in the past Himmel and Eisen were almost executed for speaking rudely to royalty. But this reminds Stark that Graf had threatened to execute him for speaking casually earlier, comedically fainting at the sight of a lumberjack appearing in the room. Luckily, Graf reassures everyone that he doesn't take offense to being addressed casually, reminding Frieren and her party that the town knows of their heroic feats and wants to celebrate their accomplishments. With Fern levitating Stark's unconscious body through town, the gang end up spending some time in town, rewarded and praised for their accomplishments, only to attend an official funeral for the fallen. Having spent enough time in town, Frieren and her party begin heading out, escorted by Graf himself, warning Frieren that their next destination with the Northern Plateau is quite dangerous. Graf asks if Frieren's party houses a first-class mage, a mage that has received a certification award from the Continental Magic Association, leading Fern to show off her third-class mage certificate. Fern asks why Frieren hasn't acquired her certificate yet, but Frieren states she's too lazy to constantly update her rank, especially since the association changes every few years. Frieren shows off her old holy emblem, but Graf suggests that Frieren visit Oberst in the Northern Lands, the largest magical city, to take the first-class exam. Graf says the gang can make it to the city if they head over the Schwer Mountains, wishing Frieren and her party the best for the future, and promising to never forget what Frieren did for their town. Heading towards the mountains, our trio realize that it's beginning to snow, prompting Frieren to reveal that during the previous war with the Demon King, it was ultimately the cold winter conditions that claimed the most lives. Sadly, as the gang begin venturing on, they get lost in a snowstorm, leading Stark to faint in such poor conditions. Knowing that he'll be blown away with transportation magic, Fern is forced to drag Stark along, all heading towards an emergency shelter at the foot of the mountain. Relieved to see the shelter still standing, Frieren opens the door to a strange man exercising whilst half-naked, terrifying Fern as she is afraid the man is a pervert. Defusing the situation, the man reveals that he too is an elf, having been 300 years since he saw one of his kind. Grateful that Fern started a fire, the man introduces himself as Kraft the Monk, amazed to hear that Frieren is traveling to Oriol, also known as Heaven. Just then, Fern states that Stark's body is getting colder, cutting to Stark's perspective where he's dreaming of a massive jumbo berry dessert, only to awaken to see Kraft sharing a bed with him. Terrified at first, Stark suddenly realizes how refined Kraft's body is, having never heard of Kraft before, but it's apparent that Kraft is quite skilled. Asking Stark to remain in the shelter, Kraft, Frieren, and Fern head out to retrieve Kraft's frozen supplies, grateful to have mages to help unfreeze his frozen carriage. Kraft takes the chance to learn more about Frieren. Impressed to hear Frieren used to be in the hero party, but Frieren refuses to reveal any more about her past. Forced to wait out the storm, the four end up sharing meals and spending time together, cutting to 6 months later where the blistering cold winds have finally died down. Kraft is seen carving a pendant for Fern, happy to hear that Fern is religious as well. Frieren asks why Kraft believes the world has a god, especially since the god of creation hasn't shown herself ever, but Kraft says he used to be a non-believer as well. Sadly, when all the people that once knew Kraft had passed away, Kraft had left his faith in the hands of God, reminding Frieren that once someone passes away, their legacy will be sealed. Therefore, Kraft asks that Frieren open up about her past. That way he can pray for her if she ever disappears. Flashing back, we see Himmel and Eisen playing with the orphans of a newly opened village. But off to the side, Frieren voices how surprised she was when she heard Hyder funded the orphans' reconstruction himself. Amused, Hyder reveals that he too was an orphan, asking to learn more about Frieren's past. That way he can pray for Frieren's future. Frieren sadly refuses to share anything, believing that her life has been very boring. But Hyder reveals that he knows Frieren has been concealing her mana permanently, something Hyder knows only exceptional mages are capable of. Hyder adds that he wants to learn more about Frieren, in case he has a mage daughter, putting a smile on Frieren's face as she tells Kraft that she already has someone that has prayed for her. Relieved to hear so, Kraft prays that Frieren reunite with her friends in heaven, heading off as Kraft states that Frieren and himself will hopefully meet in the next few centuries, officially parting ways. Trudging through the piles of snow, Frieren ends up falling asleep, worrying Fern as she wonders if she should allow Stark to carry her precious master. In Frieren's dream, she remembers the time when herself and the hero party first set out, annoyed to have only received 10 copper coins to kickstart their adventure. Motivated to earn lots of money through their adventures, Himmel unsheathes his hero's blade, but sadly Hyder says the blade is a replica. Himmel had received the replica from saving a merchant, and decided to become a true hero when a young Hyder accused Himmel of only ever being a fake hero. With Himmel declaring that he'll one day acquire the real hero's sword, Frieren suddenly awakens from her dream, instructing Fern to head north towards a nearby village. Seeing as Frieren is still unable to walk, Fern soldiers on with Frieren on her back, refusing to allow Stark to carry Frieren. Seeing as the storm has died down, the gang arrive at the nearby village of the sword, greeted by the 49th village head, someone that is younger than expected. The chief mentions how unfortunate that a nearby cabin was destroyed, most likely due to the lord of the cabin, but Stark recognizes the village as the location that used to protect the hero's sword. Stark remembers that there was a sword that remained in a stone for centuries, up until Himmel himself drew the sword, a blade that would only accept a true hero. Heading to warm up in a nearby cabin, the chief cries that Frieren was meant to check on them every 50 years, but Frieren reasons that a checkup every 80 years would be fine as well. Seeing as the town is in dire need of monster extermination, the gang head out the next day, slaying some nearby snow beasts. Fern wonders why the village didn't hire any adventurers to help with the extermination, but Frieren utters that it's due to Himmel being the hero, prompting Stark to leap onto a pack of monsters gathered at the front of the cave, shocked to discover what is inside. Before Stark can ask Frieren about what is in the cave, the Lord appears from the snow, squashing Stark, but Frieren realizes that the Lord has gotten weaker over the years. Before the Lord can attack Frieren, Stark appears, severing one of the creature's arms, prompting Fern to cast a barrier to protect Frieren from the creature's second claw. Pleased by her students' attacks, Frieren decimates the Lord with one single spell, fulfilling her duties. Heading over to Stark, Stark asks to know why the hero's sword is still in the stone, but Frieren utters that the sword's aura is attracting the monsters, but a barrier is protecting the monsters from claiming the sword. Seeing as Stark is more curious as to why the sword is still here, Frieren gets permission from the chief to tell the truth, revealing that Himmel actually failed to draw the sword from the stone. Even after failing, Himmel promised to slay the Demon King, fulfilling his promise and ultimately became a true hero, even without the magical sword. Fern wonders why people would lie about Himmel retrieving the sword. But Frieren reminds everyone that a hero doesn't need embarrassing stories staining their legacy, and is meant to be a pillar to shape and inspire future generations. As everyone leaves the scene, Stark can't help but stare at the blade, suddenly remembering a flashback, only to cut to later that day where the gang prepare to depart, promising to return in 50 years' time. Deciding to head to a more thriving village, Frieren gives everyone permission to do as they please after checking in, leading Fern to invite Frieren to go shopping with her, but Frieren declines, wanting to spend the day reading her grimoire. Out of nowhere, Frieren suddenly remembers today is Stark's 18th birthday, shocking Fern as she hasn't thought of what present to get Stark. Fern is curious if Frieren has prepared something for Stark, making Frieren gleefully rush towards her suitcase, unveiling a potion that dissolves clothing, an item that Frieren learned men would love. Annoyed, Fern dumps the potion all over Frieren, storming off at how disgusting Frieren's present was. But now left alone, Frieren wonders what present to get Stark now. Reaching for a ring, Frieren wonders if Stark is worthy of such an item, but instead retrieves a piece of paper with some writing. Following Fern, she decides to gather intel on Stark's likes and dislikes. But upon discovering that Stark is not in his room, Fern goes out in search of him. Asking around, Fern is surprised to hear Stark has already been helping out the villagers, ultimately locating Stark gazing out into the view. Relieved to see Stark is so mature, Fern slowly approaches Stark but freezes upon hearing Stark admire the breast and turd-shaped clouds. Calling out to Stark, Fern glares at Stark for being so childish, but asks if Stark would like to go on a walk with her. Seeing Fern so quiet, Stark wonders what he may have done to upset her, but Fern begins panicking, wondering how she can find a gift for Stark without being suspicious. Not wanting to stress too much, Fern simply asks what Stark would like for his birthday, but gets irritated seeing Stark so confused as to why Fern is willing to get him a birthday present. Annoyed, Fern storms off, but is shocked to hear that Stark never received a present from Eisen nor his family, as Stark says they didn't care about him. Stark reveals that his family was a group of warriors, flashing back to when Stark's father scolded the village warriors for being so weak, asking them to be more like Stoltz, uninjured and cold-blooded. Stark's father reminds Stoltz that he's the strongest in the village, compared to Stark, who has no talent and hasn't even slayed a monster yet. Even though his father didn't want Stoltz around Stark, Stoltz chose to spend time and train Stark. Sadly, when a demon attacked his village, Stark was the lone survivor, having fled when everyone else fought for their village. Stark wonders if Himmel would have stayed and fought till the very end, but Fern reassures Stark that he's a changed man, asking Stark to accompany her and pick a present for himself. Settling on a silver bracelet, the two return to Frieren, who has served up some massive hamburger steaks, something that pleases Stark as he wouldn't receive any gifts from Eisen, but would receive a hearty hamburger steak meal during his birthdays. Frieren takes the chance to reveal how awkward warriors are when it comes to expressing their emotions, mentioning how Eisen would only serve large hamburger steaks on people's birthday as a sign of respect for a warrior that has worked hard. Stark suddenly realizes that Stoltz would also cook him a hamburger steak during his younger years, remembering the moment when Stoltz had instructed Stark to flee and live, finally coming to his senses as he sees his family truly cared for him. Tasting the hamburger steak, Stark thanks Frieren for the meal, curious as to what the potion Frieren is carrying, but Fern simply calls Stark a pervert. Several days later, we see Frieren chatting with Sane, someone who is intrigued to hear that Frieren is an adventurer, as he too used to dream of becoming one. Sane mentions how he had a friend who was fixated on living out an adventurous life, but as Sane grew older, he slowly grew apart from his friend who continued down the adventurer path. Sane admits that he regrets not joining his friend 10 years ago. But when Frieren asks why Sane is telling her his backstory, Sane says he needs to prepare for his village upcoming festival, so he needs help escaping the swamp he is stuck in. Contemplating if she should help save Sane, Frieren fears that she'll get dirty in the process, but as Fern joins them, the girls help Sane out and end up escorting him back to his village. Grateful for the help, Sane offers to guide Frieren and the gang around town, but Frieren says they need to head to a bigger town to restock supplies. With the gang departing, Sane warns the gang to beware of venomous creatures. But not even a few minutes later, Stark is unfortunately bitten by a venomous creature whilst trying to pick some fruits. Immediately bleeding from the nose, Frieren tries to identify the poison, but admits that she doesn't have any spells to do so. Seeing as Fern can't use her flying magic for too long, Frieren reasons that they'll head back to the small village, but Stark says he doesn't feel weak whatsoever. Frieren does mention that Eisen used to brush off various poisonous arrows all the time, but upon hearing that 20% of adventurers pass away due to poison, Frieren and Fern rush Stark to the nearby village. Having made it to a nearby church, the father of the church sadly reports that he can't save Stark, calling out to see if his brother could help. Revealed to be the man from earlier, Sane recognizes Frieren and her party, instantly curing Stark of his poison. Having returned the favor for rescuing him earlier, Sane heads out to help out at the plaza, but Frieren is curious as to who Sane is. Frieren notes how Sane's brother has been recognized as an outstanding priest by the royal capital and given a necklace to prove so. And even he couldn't cure Stark's poison, but for some reason Sane nonchalantly could. Sane's brother recognizes Sane to be a genius, revealing that he knows about Frieren, having been gifted the necklace by Hyder himself. Sane's brother notes how Sane's spark has left him ever since he became a priest, but wanting Sane to live a more fulfilling life. Sane's brother asks if Frieren would be willing to take Sane on their adventures. Having a team meeting, Stark is all for having a priest accompany them, but seeing as Frieren and Fern are hesitant on the idea, Stark takes matters into his own hands, heading to invite Sane to their party. Upon heading downstairs, Stark spots Sane indulging in some alcohol, smoking, and gambling. Ironic since Sane is meant to be a pure priest, but Sane gets intrigued hearing Stark invite him on their adventures, agreeing to join Friren's party if Stark can beat him at gambling. As Frieren enjoys her nap, Fern suddenly wakes Frieren up, having heard Stark cry for help. But as they rush outside, they spot a naked Stark along with a naked Sane, both robbed of their belongings by some elders in the village. Sane takes the chance to refuse Stark's offer to join Friren's party, knowing that it's already too late for someone like him. But this reminds Frieren of the time when Himmel had asked Frieren to join their hero party. Having also refused the invitation, Frieren had told Himmel that she wasn't qualified and scared of fighting the Demon King since she had stopped slaying demons for 500 years. But remembering Himmel's words, Frieren orders Sane that he still has the choice to change his future. With Sane still refusing to join, Frieren admits that she despises Sane, but that is also the reason why Frieren will be forcing Sane to join them. At the same time, Fern manages to retrieve the boys' items from the elders, returning Stark and Sane's items, only to storm off. Having another meeting, Fern voices how disgusting it is that people gamble, but Frieren does admit that Sane has the chops to become an adventurer. Spending some more time in town, our trio helps set up for the Harvest Festival, spending more time with Sane, all whilst he thinks about how Frieren and her party really resemble his adventurer friend. Sane thinks about how his friend had promised to return 7 years ago, but as Frieren and her party ask Sane's brother for what may convince Sane to join them, Sane's brother does mention how Sane prefers older women. Spotting Sane nearby, Frieren announces herself as an older woman, having lived over 1,000 years, but Sane states that Frieren's features don't attract him whatsoever. Having no choice, Frieren unveils her secret seduction technique, blowing a kiss for Sane, but Sane gets weirded out. Shocked to see that Fern and Stark have been seduced, they learn that Frieren's kiss had once knocked out Himmel, but having had enough, Sane states that he refuses to join their party. Frieren tries bringing up Sane's friend as a way to convince Sane, but Sane states that his friend is probably dead by now, having gone missing for 10 years already. Frieren tells Sane to travel and confirm if his friend is truly dead or not, advising Sane to live his life wisely. That way he won't have any more regrets. Sadly, Sane reveals the final reason he can't leave the village is because he doesn't want to leave his older brother. Sane mentions how he overheard his brother's conversation with Hyder, having been offered a position for Sane and his brother to move to the holy capital, but Sane's brother had refused as he didn't want to leave the village their deceased parents raised them in. Since Sane's brother refuses to leave the village, Sane states that he won't as well, but hearing how Sane truly feels, Sane's brother slaps Sane, reminding Sane to chase after his dreams and live a life with no regrets. That evening, whilst our trio are fishing, Sane reports to Frieren that he's patched things up with his brother, agreeing to go on an adventure and search for his friend. But this means that Sane will only accompany our trio for a fraction of their journey. With a final goodbye to his brother and his village, Sane agrees to live the rest of his life without regret, officially joining Frieren and her party on their journey. Having made it to the Rod region in the northern lands, the gang are amazed at the variety of stores in town, something that reminds Frieren of the hero party. Several minutes later, we see Fern and Stark bickering, leading Stark to storm out of the room, annoyed that Fern isn't listening to him. Wondering what all the commotion is about, Sane learns Fern is annoyed Stark didn't get her a birthday present, but Sane reveals that he too didn't get Fern a birthday present. Refusing to hear Sane's yapping, Fern begins kicking Sane, forcing Sane to promise to get Fern a gift. Before Sane leaves, he advises Fern to make things up with Stark, something Frieren agrees with. Heading out, Fern spots Stark admiring the bracelet she got him, but Fern is unable to approach Stark after what she did. At the same time, we see Sane eyeing a pouch with a butterfly, only for Fern to appear, complimenting Sane on knowing what she likes. When Sane asks if Fern has apologized to Stark, Fern admits that she couldn't, but Sane deduces that Fern doesn't hate Stark, but that she actually doesn't know how to speak with boys her age. When Sane asks Fern to pick a gift for herself, Fern refuses, making Sane smile as he chooses a pouch for Fern. Sane reminds Fern that Stark isn't the smartest person in the world. Plus, it was a joint effort when Fern bought Stark a gift on his birthday. Seeing Fern slowly realize she was in the wrong for lashing out earlier, Sane hands Fern her gift, advising Fern to go pick a gift with Stark for her birthday, and that Stark will only know how she feels if she tells Stark outright. Grateful for the advice, Fern starts by apologizing to Sane for kicking him earlier, only to head to Stark's location before sundown. Before Fern can say anything, Stark admits that he wanted to buy a gift with Fern since he didn't know what she would like, amusing Fern as she apologizes for being too harsh earlier. With both heading out to search for a gift together, we see Frieren spying on the two, caught by Sane, who is jealous that Stark and Fern can afford to argue as the older people get. They tend to avoid conflict at all costs. Sane wonders how Frieren has been able to deal with the two kids up until now. But he realizes that Frieren herself acts like a kid, explaining why Fern went to him for advice instead of Frieren herself. Frieren mentions how Fern was raised by Hyder, a priest just like Sane, but Sane refuses to be compared to such a great priest like Hyder. Frieren reassures Sane that Hyder was as corrupt as they come, always drinking, picky with his food, and even lying quite often. Surprised, Sane says he always saw Hyder as the ideal man, reminding Frieren of a deep conversation with Hyder. Frieren had asked why Hyder seemed different from his hero party days, learning that ever since Hyder had finished his younger years of life, he began pretending to be an ideal adult. That way younger people could depend on him, especially Fern. Hearing this, Frieren asks who Hyder can depend on then, but upon hearing that Hyder has always been depending on the goddess, Frieren offers to praise Hyder for the rest of his years, only to pat Hyder on the head. In the present, Frieren pats Sane on the head, praising Sane for his mature thinking, but Sane gets annoyed, all while Stark and Fern settle on a bracelet for Fern's birthday gift. Now in the Bandwoods, Frieren thanks the carriage driver for giving them a lift, learning that the driver is a merchant that owns an accessory store in the nearby town. Impressed by the merchant's sale tactics, Frieren suggests that Fern visit the store later, but suddenly spots the bracelet Stark bought for Fern, flustering Fern. Frieren utters that Himmel had once bought her a ring with a similar design, but upon digging up the ring, the carriage suddenly violently shakes. Having been snatched up by a massive bird, the gang wonder how they should proceed, with Stark suggesting they take out the bird and Frieren levitate the carriage afterwards. Sadly, Frieren reveals that flying magic was only discovered 40 years ago, and that the humans had stolen the flying technique from demons, meaning most flying magic can only be briefly used on objects smaller than a human. Frieren suggests that she fly away with the merchant, Fern fly away with Sane, and Stark leap out of the carriage. But Stark reminds Frieren that he is a human, disappointing Frieren as she remembers Eisen would easily tank any free falls. Fern suggests that they levitate the carriage right before it hits the ground, and seeing as the bird is preparing to slam the carriage into the ground, Frieren leaps outside, instantly slaying the creature. As the carriage begins to free fall, Frieren manages to save everyone, but everything is still damaged. Having healed the horse, the gang begin repairing the destroyed carriage the next day, but Frieren is more concerned that she lost her ring. Elsewhere, the others begin preparing some food, all wondering why it has gotten warmer recently. But Sane takes the chance to praise Stark for dedicating 3 hours to find a gift Fern would like. Although Fern can overhear the boys' conversation, she is happy that Stark is proud of the choice as well. But Sane reveals that the design on the bracelet is a mirrored lotus representing eternal love. Flustered, Stark apologizes for the weird gift, but Fern could care less, more annoyed at Sane for instigating things. As the gang continues spending time in the forest, they work together to repair the carriage whilst hunting and sharing meals together. At night, Frieren would spend time searching for a lost item, and by day, the gang continued to repair the carriage. But one day, Fern asks why Frieren has been venturing off at night. Upon hearing that Frieren had lost the ring Himmel had given her, Fern quickly helps to search for it, but Frieren says she doesn't want to waste time. Fern refuses to accept such a decision, mentioning how the lotus on the ring means eternal love, but Frieren doubts Himmel knew that when he gifted it to her. Upon telling the others about the lost ring, the merchant actually reveals that he has a spell for finding lost jewelry and accessories, as most people in town would often lose their valuables. Pleased, Frieren puts the spell to work, remembering the moment when Himmel had asked Frieren to pick out a gift for slaying the Demon King. Upon seeing that Frieren had chosen the lotus ring, Himmel smirks, getting down on one knee only to place the ring on Frieren's fingers, as if he was proposing. Having found the item, Frieren is relieved that she didn't give up on the search, but is more curious as to why Stark had given Fern a lotus-designed bracelet as well. Moving on to the Lob Hills, Fern is seen exhausted, collapsing onto Frieren, but this makes Sane wonder how long Fern and Frieren have known each other. Fern utters that it's been 4 years, and Stark adds that he's been with everyone for 1 year. But as the gang continue on their journey, Sane mentions how their party lacks something. Frieren says they have a frontliner, 2 mages, and a priest, making Fern suggest they need a thief to help deal with the mimic chest that Frieren keeps getting caught in. Sane suggests that they add a mature older lady, but as the gang enter the next village, they're all horrified to see everyone is unconscious. Inspecting the bodies, the gang confirm that everyone is simply asleep, something Frieren recognizes as a curse. Frieren explains that curses are spells cast by monsters and demons, with the most well-known ones being turning people into stone and putting them to sleep, magic that humans aren't able to unravel. Luckily, priests draw their magic from the goddess, and it's the role of the clergy to unravel such spells, meaning Sane may be able to identify and break said curse. As the gang gives Sane some room to assess the situation, Stark asks what's so special about magic from the goddess, learning that the goddess's magic are recorded in holy scriptures, and just like demon magic, only the owners can read and interpret such magic. Additionally, those able to read and learn the goddess's magic are naturally blessed with protection from curses, making priests a natural counter to curses. Heading outside, Frieren admits that even magic is unable to detect curses, but just then Sane reports that he's detected the source of said curse and that it'll be faster to defeat the monster inflicting said curse. Before the gang can head off, Stark is revealed to have been cursed and fallen asleep, prompting the gang to hurry. As they travel through the night, they levitate Stark's body with them, but as night falls, Fern ends up falling asleep as well. With no other choice, Frieren conceals the lovebirds with a barrier, leaving only Frieren and Sane alone. The deeper they venture into the forest, the more sleepy Frieren gets, asking Sane to wake her up when they encounter the monster, but Sane cries that he can only wake Frieren up for 5 seconds. Sensing the creature nearby, Sane has no choice but to carry Frieren with him, placing Frieren down as he finally comes face to face with a subspecies of the Chaos Flowers. Knowing that the monster is slowly draining the mana of its victims, Sane begins to evade the monster's advances, reciting that Chaos Flowers merge with local flora to exist and that their cores are their weaknesses. Taking out his book, Sane conjures several holy spears, aiming it at the core of the flower, but is surprised to see the monster had deflected the projectiles with its leaves. Wondering if he should awaken Frieren to help, Sane fears that 5 seconds won't be enough to explain the situation, fearing that if the flower deflected one of Frieren's powerful spells, the whole surrounding village would be wiped out. Just then, Sane remembers Hyder's stories, telling Sane and his best friend that Hyder would always have trouble communicating with Frieren, but Hyder always trusted Frieren no matter what. Choosing to bet everything he can on these next 5 seconds, Sane breaks Frieren from the sleeping curse. But before Sane can explain the situation, Frieren instantly shoots down the monster with a single spell. The next morning, Stark awakens next to Fern, all heading back to the village, only to be praised for saving them. As the gang head off, Sane admits how amazing Frieren was, having known instantly what type of monster it was and how to defeat it. Frieren takes the chance to praise Sane for trusting her, finally making it to the halfway point of Vorig, where their next goal is Oberst. Out of nowhere, a noble appears, inspecting and praising Stark's body only to take the 4 to his mansion. Recognizing the noble as Lord Ordin, Frieren asks that Ordin not do as he pleases, revealing that she knows the Ordin family is one of the 3 great families in the Northern Land, and that Ordin's grandfather was impulsive like Ordin himself. Seeing as Ordin is quite stubborn, Frieren attempts to leave, but upon hearing that they are low on funds, Frieren agrees to hear what Ordin is offering. As they walk through the mansion, Ordin asks where Stark is from, but upon hearing that Stark is a warrior from the Klee region, Orden reveals that his family originates from the same village. Showing a picture of his son, Wirt, Orden says that Stark looks exactly like Wirt, the heir and hero of the city. When Frieren asks to know what Orden wants, Orden reveals that his son had passed away whilst fighting a demon, giving his life to ensure the demon was defeated. Orden says only Gable the butler and a few others know of Wirt's death, and that he would like Stark to stall and keep up the town's morale as they rebuild their city's army. Orden states that there will be a party 3 months from today that he wants Stark to attend, offering to pay Frieren 10 straw gold coins and any grimoire of her choosing if Stark accepts. With no other choice, Gable begins teaching Stark the proper etiquette, all while saying drinks out and the girls enjoy tasty snacks. One day, Fern spots Stark loitering around, exhausted from everything he has to remember, but caught off guard when Stark shows Fern what he's been practicing. With Fern weirded out, Stark heads to speak with Orden, wondering how Orden feels having only been 2 months since Wirt passed away. Orden mentions how he already planned a replacement, but Stark looks closer to Wirt, admitting that he doesn't like pretending that his son is still alive. Heading outside, Orden introduces Mutt, his second son and new future heir, someone Orden doesn't believe is as great as Wirt, reminding Stark of his own family dynamic. Given a wooden sword, Orden asks Stark to demonstrate his strikes, but upon seeing Stark shake profusely, Orden asks Stark to be confident, reassuring Stark that he isn't so strict. Stark takes the chance to ask Orden how he feels about Mutt, happy to hear that although Orden is strict with Mutt, Orden still values Mutt, deeply believing that Mutt will one day surpass Orden himself. Elsewhere, Orden asks Fern to attend the party with Stark, immediately putting Fern to work, ultimately leading up to the big day. With Stark and Fern tired from the past 3 months, they both reason that they might as well show off their hard work, leading Stark to ask Fern to accompany him for a dance. At first, they start slow since Fern is quite nervous, but taking the lead, Stark guides and encourages Fern to be more confident, all while Sane and Frieren watch from the side. With the party over, Orden is seen removing his eye patch, wondering if Wirt would be alive if it weren't for his injury. Seeing Stark appear, Orden orders Gable to give Frieren her rewards, praising Stark for being a great warrior. Before Orden can offer Stark to remain by his side, Stark refuses as Stark can't replace Orden's dead son, and Orden can't replace Stark's dead father. Orden reveals that Wirt and himself had a fight during their last conversation, something Stark can relate to, as he too needs to apologize and return to Eisen before it's too late. Flashing back, we see Sane passing time by fishing, but is interrupted by his friend who drags Sane along to take photos with him, a memory Sane still thinks about. Now in the Klar region, Frieren tells everyone about a powerful dwarf in the upcoming village that has lived for over 400 years, amazing since dwarves normally live for only 300 years. Frieren says she refers to the dwarf as Old Man Vol, a rare case of someone that can relate with Frieren since they both live for a long time. But as the gang cross a small river, they spot the infamous village along with a sleeping warrior guarding the village. Revealed to be Vol, Stark feels bad for the old man, but Frieren calls Vol out for pretending to be senile again. Out of nowhere, Stark is suddenly struck, falling onto his knees as Vol warns Stark to always be cautious of everything he sees, as Vol could have easily taken off Stark's leg if he tried. With Vol inviting everyone into the village, Frieren orders Stark to remain behind and train with Vol, given a tour by one of the villagers. As Fern and Sane help the villagers harvest some crops, the villager mentions how he's never seen Vol so happy, having believed him to be only a senile old man. But the villager did mention how Vol chose to protect and remain in the village even after all this time. With the gang spending some more time with Vol, a week passes by in an instant, pleasing Frieren as Stark has improved quite a lot since training with Volume. Frieren reveals that Vol was the reason Frieren chose to learn more about Himmel and the Hero Party, cutting to the past when Himmel had asked Vol why he had stayed and protected the village for so long. Vol mentions how his wife was a human and that he's simply protecting the village to retain any memory Vol has of his wife, something Himmel finds admirable. Thanking Himmel for his kind words, Vol promises to remember the Hero Party once they've defeated the Demon King and have passed away, but Himmel reassures Vol that Frieren and Eisen will be the ones to continue their legacy even after passing. In the present, Vol asks Frieren if she remembers the faces and voices of her Hero Party, but Frieren gets offended, stating that Himmel is the reason she has begun to change. Hearing Vol utter that he has forgotten his wife's face and voice, Frieren calls Vol out for joking around, mentioning how her party will be heading to Oriol near the Demon King's castle. Pleased, Vol gets excited that Frieren is finally going off to defeat the Demon King. But this surprises Frieren, as she wants to tell Vol that the Demon King has already been defeated, but holds back, not wanting to disturb Vol's peace. With a final farewell to Vol, the gang continue on their path, occasionally stopping so Sane can ask around for his friend's whereabouts. Stark is impressed that people still remember the name of Sane's friend, even after 10 years. But Sane mentions how his friend went by Guerrilla Warrior, a memorable title. With a mere bridge separating the gang from reaching the magical city of Oberst, the gang choose to rest first at a nearby village, excited to hear that Gorilla Man did indeed help defeat a demon in the village, but only a stubborn old woman may remember where Gorilla Man did after. Upon visiting the older woman, the woman refuses to give the gang info on Gorilla Man for free, starting off by having the party run several errands that take up several hours. Once the gang has wrapped up and reported back to the older woman, she finally agrees to give the gang their final task, and only after will she give them the information they want. Heading to some old statues, the woman mentions how she recognizes Sane, but upon seeing the old statues, the gang hear that the statue honors two forgotten heroes. Realizing one of them to be Kraft, Sane suddenly remembers a time when Hyder had shown the younger versions of Sane and Gorilla Man a similar statue, warning that everyone's legacy will eventually fade and be forgotten. From that moment on, Sane's friend had claimed the name of Gorilla Man, and Sane was given the title of Goatee Priest. Having helped clean up the statue, the old lady reveals that Gorilla Man also helped clean the statues a long time ago, even speaking quite highly of Sane. As the gang begin heading off, Frieren realizes Sane knows where his friend is, believing his friend is in the opposite direction of Oberst, making Sane struggle to decide what to do. Conflicted on what he should do, Sane reminds himself that he's on the journey to look for his friend, but seeing as they need more time, the gang spend the night in town. With Fern and Sane heading out to retrieve firewood and food, Fern and Stark share a moment when Fern teases Stark with her cold hands, but the gang get worried seeing snowfall. The next day, the town is consumed by a blizzard, meaning they won't be able to proceed with their adventure until the blizzard dies down. Luckily, Frieren knows that there's a magic store with a shady shopkeeper, mentioning there could be a possibility for legendary spells. Since they'll be staying in town for a month, Sane gets quite relieved, getting to share meals and spend time with Frieren and the others. With several days already passing by, Sane is seen drinking with one of the village elders, realizing that he's been spending time away from Frieren and the others. At that moment, Frieren appears, asking if Sane can mediate an argument between Fern and Stark. Upon checking up on the two, Sane and Frieren ask why Fern is angry with Stark, but seeing as they aren't getting anywhere, Sane chooses to speak with Stark privately. Stark reveals that he was simply paying Fern back for the time when she placed her cold hands on Stark's face. But when he did it to Fern, Fern got mad at him. Seeing as Stark and Fern are having another simple disagreement, Sane asks Stark to simply apologize and tell Fern what his true intentions were. Up next, Sane speaks with Fern privately, relieved to hear that Fern doesn't hate Stark for what he did, but was simply frightened when Stark held Fern in place with his strong hand. With the two lovebirds making up, Frieren and Sane share a meal, prompting Sane to ask why Frieren invited him on the journey in the first place. Frieren reveals that Sane reminded Frieren of herself before she met Himmel and the hero party, simply giving Sane a reason to adventure and live life, just like how Himmel gave Frieren a reason to live. Grateful for the memories, Sane bids farewell the next morning as he plans to search for his friend, surprising Stark and Fern since the farewell was quite short. As our trio make it to the Offen mountain ranges, where Stark is tasked with hunting and gathering, but one day Stark discovers that Fern has caught a fever. Calling on Frieren to cure Fern, Frieren realizes that Sane had left behind some medicinal herbs, grateful as Frieren can identify the illness and cure Fern accordingly. Stark is surprised Frieren has a holy scripture of her own, managing to identify the illness as a simple cold, and it would make sense to head to a nearby village to get out of the cold. Upon confirming that there is an icicle cherry blossom tree nearby, Frieren chooses to hold Fern's hand, mentioning how Fern feels safe when her hand is held while she is sick. Embarrassed, Fern turns away, leading our duo to head out only for Frieren to tell Stark stories of when Fern was shorter than Frieren herself. After a long day of traveling and resting, the two make it to the base of the gorgeous cherry blossom tree, where the mushrooms at the base of the tree are their target. Stark wonders why Frieren chose to hold Fern's hand out of all things, but Frieren simply mentions how it's the only thing she knows how to do when supporting someone whilst they're sick. Flashing back, It turns out Himmel had once held Frierin's hand when she was sick, having learned it from his mother. Although Frierin thought it was strange, the thought of knowing Himmel was quite soothing when Frierin was sick, and hence Frierin promises to hold Stark's hand when he's ill as well. Upon retrieving the mushrooms, Frierin begins concocting a scary-looking mixture, only to feed the medicine to Fern, all while Stark helps out in the village. Having made a full recovery, the gang thank the village for all the help, finally heading towards Oberst, the Magic City. Finally laying eyes on the Grand City, the trio reasoned that they should look for a carriage to cut down on time, prompting Fern to remind Frierin to take the first-class mage certificate if they want to enter the Northern Plateau. Frierin wonders why Fern doesn't take the first-class exam as well, but Fern gets discouraged since only a handful of powerful mages have ever achieved the first-class certificate. Fern wonders why a first-class mage must accompany parties traveling to the Northern Plateau, but Frierin reveals that in the past monsters like the Einsan would require a skilled mage and priest, but since a first-class mage is still required, it must mean something is happening in the Northern Plateau. Having hitched a ride, Frierin mentions how the exam contains a combat test, wondering what strategy she should come up with to win. Fern is surprised, believing that even with Frierin's suppressed mana, she is still above average, so no strategy will be needed. Frierin takes the chance to educate Fern, revealing that a mage's technique, experience, spells, control, effort, and tenacity will also play a role in the overall strength of a mage. Frierin adds that she's lost 11 times to mages with less mana than herself, these being 4 demons, one of which was Qual, 1 elf, and 6 humans. At the same time, we see a green-haired mage traveling by foot to Graf Franit's domain, stopping to take a break, only to run into some bandits. Before the bandits can attack the mage, Kraft appears, nonchalantly beating and scaring the bandits off. The mage thanks Kraft, introducing herself as Yubel the mage. But Kraft reveals that he wasn't here to save Yubel, but in fact he was protecting the bandits, having found the corpses of other bandits torn up by a powerful mage. As both part ways, Yubel mentions how she's heading to take the first-class exam, reminding Kraft that Frierin had planned to do the same thing as well. Now at the Magic Association in town, the receptionist tells Frierin that her exam is in 2 months and that first-class exams can be taken once every 3 years. Upon hearing that a 5th-class mage or higher certification is needed before taking the exam, Frierin attempts to flee, but Fern stops Frierin, reminding her that they need a first-class mage to continue their journey. Frierin states that they can simply hire a first-class mage or travel by sea, but Fern says that they don't have the finance to afford such a thing. Taking out her old holy emblem, Frierin asks if her emblem can be used for anything, but out of nowhere an older gentleman asks to have a close look at Frierin's emblem, shocked at what he sees. That afternoon, Frierin is surprised someone recognized her holy emblem, flashing back to her time in the hero party when Frierin had shown off her emblem to the others. Sad to see that her party also doesn't know what the emblem symbolizes, but both the hero party and her current party remind Frierin that they have no doubt that Frierin is an incredible mage. Reading up on the regulations set by the Continental Magic Association, a proper mage is someone who achieves at least a 5th-class title, learning that Fern took a 3rd-class title since it was the most available test at the time. Frierin reads that there are 600 mages with at least a 5th-class title, but including apprentices from the 6th to the 9th class, there are 2,000 mages. Out of the bunch, there are 45 first-class mages, and first-class exams are held every 3 years either at Oberst or the Holy City of Strahl. Sadly, there have been no new first-class mages as of recently, and ever since the Demon King was defeated, mages have become quite rare. Since both girls will be taking the first-class exam, they both begin training, even spending time to celebrate Frierin's birthday, ultimately leading to the big day. Now in front of the exam proctor, the first-class mage Janot, amongst the examinees, the examiners take note of Werbel, a 2nd-class mage and captain of the Northern Magic Corps. Next is Denkin, the 2nd-class mage that had recently acquired the Imperial Mage title, and finally is Fern, the youngest 3rd-class mage with top marks. Looking around a bit more, the examiners also spot Yubel, a 3rd-class mage who failed her recent 2nd-class exam, but this was because she ended slaying her 1st-class mage examiner. Additionally, the examiners notice Frierin exuding a potent amount of mana, but just then Janot reveals that the 57 examinees present will be split into groups of 3 for their first test. With everyone given a magic bracelet, Frierin realizes that the bracelet needs to be infused with magic, allowing her to see the glow of her party members' bracelets. with Frieren stumbling upon her rowdy party members. Fern is also coincidentally partied up with Jubal, all heading to the first testing grounds. Jeannot explains that the small birds called stills live in the area, only to assign all parties to retrieve a still by sunset the next day if they want to pass. Plus, all party members must be present for it to count. Upon hearing that parties can't leave the testing grounds, Frieren feels helpless spotting her two teammates fighting over the birdcage. Defusing the situation, Frieren introduces herself, learning her teammates go by Lawine and Carney, the third-class mages. Carney mentions how Lawine and herself go way back, but they both admit they've never encountered a still before, all three reasoning they should all focus up to track down a still. With Carney and Lawine continuing to bicker and fight, Carney gets exhausted, forcing the girls to rest for a bit. Seeing as they're wasting time, Lawine suggests that she continues to search alone, learning that Lawine is stronger than Carney, but Lawine admits that she doesn't compare to Frieren. With Frieren advising that Lawine watch the skies, Frieren takes a breather, but Carney wonders why Frieren asked Lawine to watch the skies. Frieren wonders if Carney struggles to detect mana, but suddenly Lawine appears, reporting that she's found a still. Instantly, Carney attempts to trap the bird in a water barrier, but when the bird evades, Lawine manages to freeze the water, ultimately capturing the still. Although Frieren praises the girl's attempt, the still instantly disappears, dousing the girls with water as Frieren reveals that stills move faster than the speed of sound, suggesting that they continue to observe the bird before capturing it. Spending more time together, Carney and Lawine continue to argue, and sadly they fail to capture a single still, but they choose to set up camp as night falls. That night, Carney awakens to the sound of rain, only to notice that Frieren is missing, only to go out in search of her. Having made it to a cliff, Carney wonders where the sound of rain is coming from, but is suddenly attacked by a monster. Pinned down and without her staff, Carney cries for Lawine, but out of nowhere Frieren binds the creature, reminding Carney to watch the skies. Giving Carney time to calm down, Frieren wonders why Carney and Lawine work well together even though they hate each other. Carney reveals that she is quite a coward, remembering a time when Lawine had stayed back to help Carney learn how to fly, even giving Carney several compliments to cheer her on. When Carney still refused to fly, Lawine kicked Carney off the cliff, impressed that Carney learned to fly when it mattered the most. Frieren is happy to hear that Carney and Lawine appreciate each other after all, but is more intrigued to hear that Carney has come up with a plan to capture a still. Returning to the campsite, Frieren sits watch as the girls sleep, remembering a time when Eisen was shaking in fear, knowing that their hero party needed to face a dragon. Himmel apologizes as he thought an inspirational speech would help Eisen out, but when Himmel admitted that he was scared as well, Eisen thanked Himmel for being honest. Knowing that the dynamics for parties differ from case to case, with Frieren leaving to test something, we switch over to Fern's party, who had managed to capture a still for themselves. Seeing Fern relaxed, Fern's members remind Fern that other parties can still steal their still, asking that Fern prepare to fight other mages. The next morning, Frieren and her party go over what they know about the still. First, the creatures travel faster than the speed of sound. Next, the bird can break out of any normal restraints. Additionally, the creatures can detect mana and flee upon sensing danger. Lawine points out that they won't be able to detect the creature, since the stills don't have any mana, but Frieren points out how she was experimenting with a spell last night that could capture the creature. Frieren reveals the spell to be developed to specifically hunt down birds, the exact same spell Frieren used to bind the monster that attacked Carney last night. Lawine wonders why Frieren didn't mention the spell earlier, but Frieren reveals that the spell can only be cast 50 centimeters within range of the target, and unfortunately the closest they've gotten to a still is 3 meters. Frieren asks if the girls can possibly stop the bird with their magic, prompting both girls to suggest that their freezing and water spells could possibly temporarily restrain the bird, but it would be tough to get close without it sensing their mana. Suddenly realizing something, Frieren tells the girls her idea, intriguing the girls as they may have to fight with the other parties, but they commit since it's their only option. At the same time, Fern, Jubal, and Land all choose to hide in a cave, but upon running out of water, they all decide to replenish their water. But Jubal suddenly realizes that the ground they're walking on used to be a riverbed. Fern asks how powerful the barrier is, wondering if the barrier stopped the flow of water into the testing area. But Land points out that there is still a source of water in the middle of the testing area. Additionally, since the still won't survive without water, Fern's party agrees to search for smaller ponds nearby, But upon detecting a magic projectile nearby, Fern instantly conjures a barrier to defend. Unable to spot their foes, Fern continues to stall, all whilst Yubel fends off Warble's advances. Land faces Sharf, and Fern faces Airy. Warble takes the chance to praise Fern for reacting to his spell, but before the two parties can initiate their duel, a massive beam of light suddenly consumes the central lake. Lawine is revealed to be freezing the central entire lake, confusing the other parties as they fail to unfreeze the lake. Having witnessed Lawine's magnificent spell, Denkin reasons that no still will now come to the lake again, advising his team members, Richter and Laufen, to follow after Frierin and her party as they plan on stealing their still. As Frierin and her party set their plan into motion, Fern and Warble's party begin clashing, all agreeing to separate for now. Assessing the situation, Denkin scolds the mages for wasting their magic attempting to unfreeze the lake, but also doesn't recommend mages search for other waterholes whilst in the air, as they will be vulnerable to monsters. Turning and heading after Frieren's party, Denkin runs into the party they saw flying earlier, having been slaughtered and taken prey by the monsters. When Laufen suggests that they at least bury the corpses of their fellow mages, Denkin forbids it, revealing that the Geisel monsters hunt based on their prey's mana, and since the corpses still have mana, the Geisel will lock onto them if they move the bodies. Laufen wonders how sadistic the examiners are for not caring about the lives of the test takers, but Richter states that the Continental Magic Association simply wants to keep a certain standard for those who manage to become a first-class mage. Denkin voices how he despises the association's old way of thinking, having seen mages greater than himself fail to achieve anything noteworthy, but just then Denkin spots a suspicious body of water. Upon further inspection, Denkin manages to detect a faint scent of mana infused in the water, believing it to be Frierin and her party's doing, and as a result of the mana in the water, the stills won't come near this body of water. Denkin deduces that Frierin and her party plan on infusing all watering holes with mana, forcing the still to rally at their desired body of water, but seeing as there is no way of finding which body of water Frierin and her party are at, Denkin suggests that they all rest for now. At the same time, Carney is seen reporting that she's infused as many bodies of water with her mana, all agreeing to bunker down in their current positions for Estelle to appear. Seeing as they now need to wait, Frierin suppresses her mana even further, uttering that she mustn't move or else mana will be released. As Carney and Lawine hide nearby, Frierin watches as various creatures drink from the nearby water source, but upon spotting a still land on her shoulder, Frierin successfully captures a still. In that instant, Denkin manages to detect Frierin's spell, sending Laufen to keep Frierin occupied. At the same time, Land faces Sharf, all whilst Fern faces Airy, who is shocked to see Fern is able to defend against all of her attacks. Strange since Fern uses basic attack and defense spells. Curious, Airy gets weirded out, having sensed a strange confidence exuding from Fern, but Airy does feel bad for Yubel, declaring that she'll be slaughtered having to face off against Warble the strongest in their party. Fern calls Airy's bluff, revealing that she knows her is far stronger than Warble himself, but not denying it. Airy states that Warble's experience in battle is unmatched. Cutting to Warble and Yubel's duel, Warble is forced to go on the defense, unable to detect Yubel's slashing attacks. Pausing for a moment, Yubel mentions how she may have overdid her attacks, but Warble deduces that Yubel's slashing attack has a 5-meter range, declaring that they should fight until the end. Back with Fern, she chooses to simultaneously fire hundreds of projectiles, testing how long Airy can keep her barriers up, but after a few seconds, Fern manages to break through. With Warble revealing his trump card, Warble is able to seal away Yubel's mana, forcing her on her knees as she realizes that Warble could have easily binded and slayed her during their initial encounter. Warble reveals that simply looking at Yubel will bind her, so he gives Yubel the chance to leave behind the still and flee. But suddenly realizing something, Yubel tosses the still into the air, leaping forward only to barely miss a slash on Warble's eyes. Rebinding Yubel, Yubel deduces that Warble needs to have view of the entire target's body, but Warble realizes that Yubel is quite the sick person, having wanted to torture Warble by removing his eyes instead of cleanly severing off his head. With no other choice, Warble prepares to slay Yubel here and now, but is intrigued hearing Yubel asking if Warble has ever slayed a child or mother. Playing along, Warble reveals that wars from where he comes from are quite messed up, as it wasn't too uncommon for children and mothers to be sent to war. Chatting for a bit longer, Yubel realizes that Werbel's binding spell is a reflection of himself, as he doesn't like taking people's lives and prefers to bind them where he can. But before Werbel can silence Yubel for good, Fern appears, ordering Werbel to not move. Shocked, Werbel notes how he couldn't sense Fern at all, deducing that Fern was the one to have captured the still for her party. Yubel notes how Werbel also had a binding spell, but was just unlucky to have not stumbled across a still for himself. Demanding to know where Aerie is, Werbel is shocked to learn that Fern killed her, making it now impossible for his party to finish the exam, as all party members must be alive and present to pass the exam. Unbinding Yubel, Werbel heads off, allowing Yubel to praise Fern for lying. Cutting to Land and Sharf, Sharf manages to weave his projectiles through Land's barrier, landing a fatal blow on Land's dominant arm. Land admits that Sharf's ability to turn petals into metal is an amazing spell, but Land has already identified the spell's weakness, pissing Sharf off as he demands Land surrender. Scolding Sharf for not being able to detect mana, Land appears behind Sharf, revealed to have used cloning magic the moment the test began. Knocking Sharf out, we cut to Werbel, who is relieved to see that Aerie is still alive, only knocked out due to mana exhaustion. Werbel learns that Fern used basic offensive magic to defeat a prodigy like Aerie, terrified to imagine what type of monster Fern will be in the future. As Werbel carries Aerie on his back, they head to Sharf's location, forcing Werbel to levitate Sharf alongside them as they all hear rain hitting the outside of the dome. Aerie and Sharf apologize for losing, since now their party will fail, but Aerie takes the chance to thank Werbel for saving her village from a demon in the past. Werbel corrects Aerie, as he had begun slaying demons in the Northern Land for a girl he liked 29 years ago, having hoped she would return once he became stronger, but ironically Werbel had already forgotten what she looked like. With Werbel and his party making plans on what to do after the exam, Aerie offers to introduce Werbel to her grandpa, who is a first-class mage, but suddenly Aerie points out a still in the trees. Instantly, Werbel binds and captures the bird, grateful that his luck has finally turned around. At the same time, we spot Frieren and her party glaring at Loffen, all whilst Denkin observes Frieren from far. In the blink of an eye, Loffen disappears, having stolen the still right from Frieren's palms, intriguing Frieren. Elsewhere, we see Examiner Sense scolding Jeannot for allowing so many promising mages to die, but Jeannot reminds Sense that only the most elite should be allowed the title of first-class mage. Sense mentions how the test revolves solely on luck, but Jeannot reminds Sense that luck is a skill as well, believing that in the remaining 3 hours for the test, things should get real interesting. Sense wonders who Jeannot thinks will pass the exam, annoyed to hear that Jeannot believes Denkin will pass, since Denkin only cares about power and money. Back with Frieren, we see Denkin and Richter reveal themselves, surprising Frieren as Loffen's Jilwer spell should have allowed her to move at a high speed and steal the still without further intervention. Unfortunately, Denkin admits that Frieren would have easily been able to track down Loffen's pathing, revealing that he knows Frieren is the elf from the famous hero party. Richter states that he plans to kill one of Frieren's party members, but before Richter can cast anything, Denkin orders Richter to stand down. Surprised, Richter wonders why a cold Imperial mage like Denkin would be so reserved to killing, but Frieren and Denkin both agree that the title of first class mage isn't worth taking another's life. Pissed, Richter reminds everyone that more than 50 years ago, the founder of the Continental Magic Association, Ciri, appeared, promising to give anyone with the title of first-class mage any spell of their choosing. People have since then regarded Ciri as the closest thing to the goddess themselves. Therefore, mages must do whatever it takes in order to obtain the title of first-class mage, if they want their wish granted by Ciri. Hearing Richter once again declare that he'll slay one of the girls, Denkin orders Richter to only place their enemies to sleep, prompting Richter to separate both parties with an earth spell, allowing Denkin and Frieren to face each other.